All right, everyone. Good evening, everyone. This meeting is called to order. I am Mayor Beverly H. Burks. And is there another phone on? You're reverbing over there. This meeting is called to order. It is Tuesday, September 24th, 2024, 7 p.m. And now I'll do roll call, starting with Vice Mayor Johnson, Councilwoman Bell,
Present.
Councilman Carroll,
Present.
Councilwoman Hood,
Present.
Councilman Perkins,
Present.
and I'll recognize online our interim city manager, Tammy Sadler-Jones. At this time, are there any updates, corrections to the agenda?
I have an update, Madam Mayor.
Yes, please, I'll take the motion.
I move to remove items under new business, items 6C, 6D, 6E, 6G, 6H, and 6I.
Okay, is that you are,
These things are being removed and added to the October work session. And
Okay.
that will be handled by our interim city manager.
okay. So you're deferring those items too?
I'm deferring the items to the October 29th work session.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded that we defer the following items to the October, what was the date?
29th.
29th council meeting. Items,
Session.
work session. 6C, 6D, 6E, 6G, and 6H. Is there any further? And I. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
Just really briefly, since we just pulled half the agenda off, just so for the public to be aware, a lot of that, obviously we have a lot to discuss tonight. And so really it's for all of our sakes. We're not here until 2 a.m. These items were not urgent, so we are moving them to next month, just so that we can get out of here before sundown or sun up.
Yes,
Sorry.
thank you, Councilman Perkins, because we wanted to make sure we have a couple of comments, couple of items that we do want to make sure we take the time to have the discussion. And so, again, we want to be mindful of stacking the agenda. And so we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to talk about these items, especially old business items, and we appreciate you coming out. So no, we don't want to be here till 2 a.m. So thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, ready for the question? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed. Thank you. And we'll go into,
Another motion.
okay.
I move to end the September 24th, 2024 work session at 10:30 p.m. and any agenda item not covered during that time will be deferred to the October 29th, 2024 work session.
Okay. And I think, do we really need that one now that we took half the stuff off the agenda?
I don't think so, because some of the stuff like the detainer thing, I don't want to wait on.
Okay.
It's like
Right.
10:25. I want to
The
cover
what
that.
thing?
Okay, and thank you. And that was Councilwoman Hood, you were bringing that up when we had all that stuff on the agenda,
Okay.
so all the items. So I appreciate that.
So shall I remove my motion?
Yes, you can rescind your motion.
I rescind my motion to move the September 24th, 2024 work session ending at, to be ended at 10:30 p.m. And any agenda item not covered during that time will be deferred to the October 29th, 2024 work session.
Right, and that's fine because we didn't do a second, but just for formality's sake. Okay. All right, with that, any other additions? Okay, thank you. We'll go into section 3, which is public comments. Any member of the public may address questions or comments to the city council referencing only agenda items after the mayor and council have had the opportunity to discuss the agenda item. Each attendee will be allowed 3 minutes for comments. And so we'll move into presentation, and we will have the first one, which is 4A preservation.
Recording in progress.
No problem. Which will start off with a presentation by the Historic Preservation Commission on 40 Oaks. And who will be doing that?
Hi, good evening. Myself and Mr. Ashton Walker from the HPC.
Okay. So So I know, Lisa, you're with Planning and Zoning, correct?
I am on the Planning and Zoning Board, yes.
Okay.
I'm here today to represent Friends of 40 Oaks.
Okay, so for formality's sake, since this is a presentation by the Historic Preservation Commission, I would like either to make sure that Ashton or Dean starts the presentation, and then you can be a contributor to it. So
Okay, sure, no problem.
all right.
So I'll go ahead and start.
And you have, okay, and no problem.
And it's 3 and 3, right?
It's a total of 5 minutes. I'll give you an extra minute for good grace, and so we'll have you kick it off.
All right. Well, I would like to start by thanking Lisa Williams for her presentation that I thought I was going right after, and you'll hear it. It's great. As well as I'd like to thank Mayor Burks and the City Council for their support. It is great to see this project finally getting the legs that it needs to support itself, taking a blighted property and moving it not just from a negative to zero, but to an actual positive community building experience. So what the Historic Preservation Commission is recommending would be a demolition of the later additions to the building. And this can be advised by Lord Act Sergeant Architect and Georgia State Professor Charles Lawrence. We'd also like the city to consider allocating at least 40 to 60 in matching funds for grants that the Historic Preservation Commission, Lisa Williams, Friends of 40 Oaks, or one of the multiple candidate grant writers that we can find will write and bring to the city to submit. Again, these are funds not paid to grant writers, but will be held as matching funds by the city. Any grant writers, master plans for the house, the National Register of Historic Places nomination report should be paid out of the Friends of 40 Oaks fundraising. All matching funds would go toward the grant goal of netting the $200,000 it would take to get the two-story building up to National Register of Historic Places quality within approximately a 2-year time frame. In the meantime, the house itself can serve as a focal point for Georgia State University historic preservation classes, as well as Friends of 40 Oak maintenance and cleanup drives around the preserve. Mothballing can be done cheaply, it simply must be done correctly. Friends of 40 Oaks will need a fundraising calendar designed to build a capital campaign. With a commitment of matching funds from the city and a stay on demolition, Friends of 40 Oaks can begin a monthly and annual fundraising strategy. The members of the Historic Preservation Commission are happy to work with them on a logic model, content creation, as well as helping with walking tours, craft fairs, charity auctions, anything else along those lines. Now, once the National Register of Historic Places based fundraising has been completed, the city will be at another crossroads and we can decide whether it wants to delist, thank everyone for their time and money, and begin fundraising for adaptation or stay on the register. It's important to remember that these options are not mutually exclusive and can be layered. We can do these things one after the other. The city of Clarkston has many friends that are excited about preserving this history, including the Georgia Trust, the DeKalb History Center, the state's Historic Preservation Division, and faculty at multiple universities. If we want to do this, we can do this very well, and this can be a very positive community building thing in which we take our history and make it something that works for us. So I think that's getting close to my time. And I'll give it to Lisa to talk about the nonprofit side of that.
Thank you, Ashton. Good evening, members of City Council. My name is Lisa Williams, and I represent Friends of 40 Oaks, or FOFO, a community-driven initiative dedicated to the preservation and revitalization of the historic 40 Oaks farmhouse and the surrounding nature preserve. We understand the council has previously voted to demolish the house, and we appreciate the challenges that led to that decision. Today, we're here to offer an alternative, a path that minimizes the financial burden on the city while preserving an important piece of Clarkston's history. 40 Oaks has been a meaningful part of Clarkston's landscape for over 130 years. Currently, the house has fallen into disrepair And while there may be considerations to leave the site vacant or develop anew, we believe that preserving the existing structure offers unique and irreplaceable value. Despite current conditions, the active community gardens managed by global growers highlight the potential that still exists here. The site has served as a gathering place in the past, and with the right support, it can once again become a space where all residents can come together and engage with nature, history, and each other. There was formerly an active Friends of 40 Oaks organization under DeKalb County that played a crucial role in fostering community involvement and maintaining the site's vibrancy. Following the transfer to City of Clarkston, that group became inactive and momentum slowed. So today, the new Friends of 40 Oaks group is eager to step into this role and revitalize these efforts with a renewed focus on preservation, environmental conservation, and creating opportunities for all residents to be involved. We're not only looking to preserve the building, we aim to rejuvenate a historical site where community, nature, and education intersect. Our vision is to create a space that offers programming and opportunities reflecting the diversity of Clarkston, ensuring that all members of the community feel welcome and connected. Our collaboration with the Historic Preservation Commission seeks to secure grants and financial support for this endeavor. Independently, FOFO is also organizing community-based fundraising events and volunteer activities such as holiday fundraising auctions, membership drives, and ecological restoration projects such as waterway cleanup, stream bank restoration, and invasive plant removal. We recognize the fiscal considerations before the council and are committed to minimizing the financial impact on the city. By leveraging grants, private donations, and community fundraising, we aim to significantly reduce the necessity for city funds. Preserving the 40 Oaks Farmhouse is more than conserving a building. It's about revitalizing a space where all of Clarkston can engage with the city's rich history while contributing to its future. We respectfully request additional time to implement our plans, promising that with your support, we can restore this site to a state of utility and beauty, reflecting the spirit of our diverse community and its shared heritage. Thank you for your time and dedication to serving our city. We look forward to collaborating and making this project a positive impact together.
All right, thank you both. That was the presentation from the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as the Friends of 40 Oaks FOFO. So at this time, council, do you have any questions on this particular item? Councilman Carroll.
I do have one question. I heard the number 200,000 is the repair. The repair quote we were given is 679,000. What's the basis for the $200,000 quote?
The $700,000 estimate was based on bringing this house up to code to make it a habitable building for as you would have on your own house if you were building a new structure. The estimate for bringing it up to historic level for renovation is much lower because we're not going to put foam insulation in the ceiling, in the attic or the roof, and the costs are just going to be a lot less because we're just basically restoring a good structure. It's not like we're taking the walls out and replacing the floor joists and things like that. The use of it would be limited. We're not going to be able to use it for office space, basically, for the most part. The cost of bringing it up to code for putting in file cabinets, storing paper, desks, things like that, like we had with the City Hall Annex, can all be avoided just by bringing it up to historic level. And we can use it for meetings. We can have people in there for different events, things like that. But to bring it up to code, we're not planning on doing that other than ADA codes.
And state your name.
What's that?
State your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dean Moore, Chairman, Historic Preservation
So is
Commission.
there a written estimate for that like breaks down how much the 200,000 goes to which cost, that type of thing?
No, it was just a thumbnail cost.
Okay. Yes, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Moore?
And it may make sense for you guys to be close so you'll be able
Right,
to
all
answer.
three of you may want to be up there. My question is about the potential demolition of the additions.
Uh-huh.
How did you break down how that was? How have you guys gone in there and itemized what was added that needed to be taken down and what that price looks like?
Yeah.
We have not gotten a price for that yet. We've had Lord Axe Sargent architects have donated their time because they feel passionate about this project, and they're working with Georgia State University Historic Preservation Department, and they're bringing students through. What they're saying is that, that front patio is not historic whatsoever. That they would like to see that gone. In the multiple reports, if you remember from the Sizemore report and the New South report, there was some debate amongst historians about how historic the later additions were. And what Lord Axe Sargent is telling us is that we don't need those and that they would recommend we get rid of those. So we're not paying to rehab those. Those also, that would be some of the materials we don't want to have to deal with. If you remember correctly, there's not really asbestos in the main building.
Right.
That's what we're looking at getting rid of. We have not gotten a quote from them. We're trying to be very gentle in our requests because I've seen their hourly costs and they are very, very nice for doing all of this pro bono as well as New South. So we can get that pretty quickly, but that's just their recommendation after this first round of searching through the house.
Last question, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
You guys basically stated you were looking for some additional time to do some more research. Do you have an idea of how much time that is?
Well, the class is over in December, and this Monday, if you'd like to be there at 4 o'clock, they're coming back again to tour the house. I had them there Monday before last for their first class. So this is all a work in progress.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Bell.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And thank y'all for your presentation. My question, either Lisa can answer it, or anybody, three of y'all can answer it, but what you giving me is a proposal of things, of funding that's needed. Do y'all have like a concrete plan that breaks it down? And then I have more questions around this demolition of the external excess of the building, and if these structures are connected, if you demolish one side of it, will it knock the other building down? Was that part of the assessment?
No, those were added on. The main structure is an I-type house, and that's a really solid structure. And that's what the main interest is with the historic architectural class. And it's very sound compared to the other parts that were added on later. It has not been well maintained, and we do want to stress that we'd like to do the, mothballing properly to prevent the main part of it reaching any type of deterioration. I was afraid that there was deterioration going on in that part because of the poor or the unguided mothballing that was done before, and where you'll see plywood is warping out from the building and water's coming in. But when I did go in there for the first time a couple of weeks ago and looked at it since that was added, there's very minimal amount of water coming in right now, but that will change if we don't do something. So we need to just rearrange plywood a little bit to protect it and get rid of the part that's deteriorated already that was added on later.
Go ahead.
In the plan, do y'all have a concrete plan with these specs and a breakdown of even the money that y'all are going to be needing as far as the matching grants, as well as how we can utilize the building after that? Because it seems to me that there need to be additional assessment on this space, but make sure it's for the community use outside of just being historically preserved. Do y'all have that somewhere written?
Well, it's the, I think we're looking at the demolition fees as sort of a base to go by, that if we have some matching funds from the city, then the grants will certainly pay for a lot of these things. I don't know if Ashton has a better breakdown than that, but this is since we've been working to get the Historic Preservation Commission to get a third member, so we can get the city designation done and move forward with our commission. Since Pat Morris Davis passed away, we've been a two-member committee, and we've been trying to get the city to solicit people to apply for it, and there's been a lot of confusion over that. And now that we do have 3 members, we're able to move forward. And we can give you more specific information later as we move forward with all this.
I think
Ashton.
No, I think that's great. I just want to add a few things that, to be honest, this is going to have to be a joint project with the city. We're the city's Historic Preservation Commission. I mean, we are the city just as you. We were appointed by you. We're giving you our recommendations. We can bring the grants. We can write the grants, but they're going to have to go through the city. They're going to have to be vetted by the city. Then, that can be a good thing. That can be a bad thing. I think having a nonprofit that wants to fundraise to hire grant writers, talk to historic architects. The Georgia Trust has recommended Brandy Morrison, who we're in talks with for doing master planning at the cost of about $4,000. We can fund that, but before we do that, before we let, Lisa Williams do this fundraising for the city, we need some kind of a buy-in to where the city is actually interested in this. I think matching funds is really a way to go to bring back a good return on investment with this. That's our recommendation. We're happy to work on a logic model. We're happy to get a timeline of events or grants or fundraising. Grants are coming up very quickly. If, we're going to apply to the Georgia Humanities Council, we need to knock that grant out in the next couple weeks. We have many grant writers that we can work with. We're happy to lend that service to the city on our free time, Lisa's free time, Lord Act Sargent's free time, Georgia State's free time. Many people love this city and want to work with the city on this project. New South has gone above and beyond. And so we're happy to work with that. But we need real sit-downs, and anyone who wants to sit down and get on a call. I know Mark Perkins has jumped on a call with Georgia State and Lord Act Sargent, and it's really not as painful as it sounds. He'll tell you they are nice people, and you have to talk to me and Dean a little more, but it's really not that bad. So we're happy to make these plans, to have these plans come through, to build out this calendar, but we need to know that's what we want.
So, and one more question, and we'll go back.
Well, my understanding is that when we referred this over, the objective was to come up with a plan of action for us to review before any discussions could take place, in order for us to make sure that we had all the information to make an indicative and decisive decision. Yeah. So that's why I'm asking. If y'all have a plan that's associated with the objective, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, if that was not the deliverable, but a plan that details to us the benefit of keeping the space there, the cost of it, and then all the expectation for the community. That was the objective, and maybe y'all going to present that in the presentation after.
I think this was their presentation. And so the question is, do you have a written document from what you've discussed that we as a council can then make a decision to move forward?
I mean, what we have provided for the packet is our written document. So yeah, that is what we have. If you would like to give us more guidelines on what the exact expectations are, we're always open and always here to listen and talk.
And Ashton, you have really been doing a yeoman's job of trying to pull all of this together.
Yeah, and before I let anybody get not named, Adria went above and beyond on her project management skills, and she put together the packet that you're looking at. So when you look at that, that was not put together by me, that was her work, and I think she did a great job. And so that's in it as well, and there are many other people with hands in this project going back 5 years. Okay. So,
all right. So, what would help out is, again, having to make sure we have all of the benefits of us keeping this, how, when we're talking about this demolition that we're even talking about now, if we can leverage that to take off those two parcels that you were talking about. And then if that's something that as we're having that discussion, that would be great, that in addition to what you're trying to do overall, if we can use that demolition to get that process going and still keep the building as an option, that would be great. But all of that, is that all? And I just want to double check, is that all in this packet to say, how long is it going to take for example, the timeline to say for the Friends of 40 Oaks, if you're going to be a 501c3, that's going to be something that's very critical in terms of your grant ability. Done? You got that? Okay, perfect. So we're ready to go in terms of you're doing the money part, which is wonderful. But council, in terms of what is presented, is this enough for you in terms of that, what we requested them? And I'll let Councilman Perkins speak.
A couple questions around, so we kind of mentioned these two competing numbers. I think the range I've seen was between $600,000 and actually $800,000 for, sounds like bringing everything up to code. And then what I'm hearing here is sort of a ballpark estimate of $200,000. So when we're saying we're getting things up to, we're kind of repairing the structural issues, of which there are a number of structural issues there. Are we talking HVAC, water? Are we saying we're bringing this back up to early 1900s, 1800s standards?
Yeah.
For the 200,000.
The 200,000 is going to be bringing it up to 1890s standards and making it look like a brand new 1890s house at museum quality. So what you're getting there is that, and the main point there is that you get a huge return on investment there. If you look at your 700,000 or 800,000 that you got from Larry Kaiser, there is a 200,000 item there that says for historic preservation. What we're telling you is that you can get rid of that by going the route that we're going. And these things can be layered. You should be layering these. You can take this campaign, you can take this community engagement, you can build this history, and you can get funding for it. And then once you have that done, you're at another crossroads where you can decide later on whether you want to put all that stuff back in or put parts of that back in, or decide what you want to do with the building, right? So we're here trying to help you get the money for as cheap and free as possible to get that building stabilized and looking very, very good. Gotcha. You can change that later on. There are no legal requirements, and you will never find anyone who tells you that a National Register of Historic Places nomination or certification puts legal requirements on what you do with that lot and that building later on.
So if I could, because my main concern is just understanding, are we going to have functioning bathrooms in it? Will there be running water, again, for that 200,000?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Now that would require bringing it up to code, though, I guess is my...
No, there's already bathrooms in there.
Okay. Is the water functioning? It's been cut off.
It's been cut off, right?
Hopefully that water's cut off, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Water was on it 2003, but it was cut off when pipe burst. Yes.
Okay, I'd have to go back and look at our code, but I think with any kind of renovation of that level, I think you do have to bring some of those items up to code. Ms. Cameron, did you have a...
Yeah,
See.
I just want to add
Ms. Cameron, please, if you're going to say something.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. I just want to add one very important part to this. We have a Parks and Recs manager now who, 40 Oaks is a part of the Parks and Recs land use. And so I know that there is an RFP for a master plan. And so I just want everyone to understand that you will have to work with that Parks and Recs manager because a plan is being put in place and we don't want 3 and 4 different visions. Like we had discussed in one of our Historic Preservation Commission meetings, is that particular property, whether we decide to use the original structure, will be utilized in a way that will be functional, but we want to make sure that the Parks and Recs manager have a say in what's happening, because At the same time, that is his role in taking care of the city parks and recreational centers.
Okay, is he here today?
I don't see him. He's probably at the park. There's probably activities going on at the park.
Has he been consulted
Oh,
on
there's
this?
soccer.
Has he been consulted on this?
Yes.
Okay.
We've walked him through it. He's given us many different plans for what he would like to see there. I can try to go back over some of the things he said, but I'll just leave his words for him, and he can contact the public and tell everyone about what he plans for 40 Oaks Nature Preserve at a different time. And
Right.
what I emphasized with him was that these things are not mutually exclusive, and I think it's important to work together on these projects. And again, what I'm going to keep coming back to is that if you get the funding to preserve this $200,000 structure, that will make no legal claims on what you do with the park or the house later on, should you want to change it, build around it, anything like that. So, but I have talked to him about it and walked through with him.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Hood?
Sorry, I had one more
okay.
follow-up. So I did have a question on the Friends of 40 Oaks organization, because sounds like there's like some history there. That's Ms. Williams, if you could. So how long has the organization been in existence?
This Friends of 40 Oaks was just formed. I'd have to look at the date. August 13th, I think.
August, okay. But y'all have 501c3 designation?
We do.
Okay, because that typically takes about 3 to 6 months.
I have the paperwork if you'd like me to send it to you from the IRS.
What designation are you underneath the 501c3? Because if there's supporting organizations, there's other types of organizations.
I would have to go back and look at the paperwork to
Yeah.
see what exactly the details are, but it is a recognized IRS 501(c).
Okay. And then do y'all, the reason I'm asking is there's certain, I guess, stipulations around how different nonprofit entities are set up. And so typically for something that's a standalone 501c3, I've worked with nonprofits before. I mean, it's a pretty long, on-ramp to be able to get that designation. Now there are like supporting nonprofits that are set up to specifically support another organization, and I'm forgetting the exact details on the language there. So that's why I'm just
No, it's
trying to
a
understand a little
standalone.
bit.
It's standalone. It's set up. It's corporation.
Okay.
But I'll be happy to share the paperwork. I probably should have included it in the packet, so sorry about that.
Okay. And then who are the other, who all is on the board of that nonprofit?
Myself was on the board, Jean Hilliard, Susan Siracusa, James Bickard, all Clarkston residents.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, if you
Thank
could
you.
send that information as well.
Sure.
I'd
Yep,
appreciate
thank you.
that.
And then we'll go to Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things. First of all, there are a number of people here tonight who would like to speak to this issue. And so the option would be to allow them to speak to this now because it's a topic of conversation, or when the item relative to the demolition comes up, they could speak at that time. But we are having a robust discussion about this, and so I think if that could be permitted, I think that would be good. The other thing I would like to say, if look in your packet and you will see more information about this plan, and it answers some of the questions. It doesn't answer all of them. And we are aware that the Parks and Recreation Master Plan is going to be developed. And so that's another reason to give time for this project to be developed in greater detail, because right now we don't have recommendations from the master plan about what would be used or for that site. So if we're going to, knowing that it's a historic site and that building is there, that might be a recommendation coming out of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
Okay, so let's make some clarification. the subject matter about the demolition is only about the demolition and should only refer to any questions, comments to the demolition. So we'll allow people to talk now. I'll give them like 20 minutes for folks to have an opportunity to speak. But for that other item, it is strictly related to demolition.
Thank
Okay?
you.
Thank you. Yes.
I really appreciate all of the support here tonight. But we got this property in 2017, and you're just now creating an organization to support it now that we have a potential bid on demolition, and you still didn't utilize the time to come up with a plan. We just needed to know what you guys wanted to see in this property so we can see if the value that is going to be needed is going to benefit the community. We don't need a museum that nobody's going to be able to go through and not understand what's happening. We want the kids to know this is why we did this and this is the benefit of it. But you guys haven't brought that to us, but you need more time. And I get it. I get that. You need more time. But if you can just give us a little more, we need to know what you want to see at 40 Oaks.
Well, and before Lisa gets up or anyone else answers that question, I will say that that building has always, or that area has been a nature preserve or an environmental building. When the woman who donated the property to DeKalb County, she made the point of making it designated as an environmental area, a natural preserve area. And so from a base level, that's what that building has always been. That area has always been the relationship that we had with DeKalb County when we went to an intergovernmental agreement, is that is to be allowed for everyone in DeKalb County to be used. And so I was going to look at Mr. Quinn to see, did we find anything in terms of the designation with that property, anything else that we need to be mindful as we're having these conversations to make sure?
I engaged a real estate attorney that we use for that, and he is doing that investigation now. I don't have the results yet.
Okay. So we wanted to make sure in terms of when that property was turned over to DeKalb County, that there were any restrictions or anything placed upon that property, because regardless of what we do, that's still important for us to know as well. So that's one of the things that Mr. Quinn is doing, along with ensuring any updates or changes to the IGA, we have that information. So from a council perspective, and just, I will say for the Friends of 40 Oaks, they came to the call. Okay, they came to the call. And so, they may not have been there early on time, but they came on time for the call. And so they came to make sure in terms of addressing the needs of making sure that building was preserved. And so I just want to make sure, thank you for doing that. You did it very quickly, and that just shows how much that you care about in keeping that, not only the building, but keeping that area from a nature preserve and environmental areas. We're looking at how we're connecting all of our parks and things together. So thank you. With that, are there any questions anymore so that we can allow the community to speak, and then we can go to the next item? Hearing none, thank you both gentlemen, and thank you, Lady Lisa, for your and all who helped put this together. Thank you for doing this within the 60-day window, and we appreciate all the hard work you're doing to make sure in terms of preservation. So we'll let people stand up. First, I'll check with the clerk to see who we had signed up for this item.
There are names listed, however, there are no item numbers. And so if we just want to have them come to the mic, and I'll check them off as they go.
Okay.
Do you want to start with the list and then anyone after?
Yeah, so
Okay.
whoever we have.
So we have Johnny Roberts.
And are you for the 40 Oaks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. I just want to take the time to say that you can't wipe away history and ignore history. This is, very serious. I don't know if any of y'all remember back in 1989, 90, this same situation came up about the house by the bridge, right around the corner, the big white house. The same situation came up, but it's either here nor there. I just hope that everybody can come together and make the right decision. Your sign say small town, but a big heart. So please just take it in consideration and don't tear down history. Don't wipe away history, because I'm down at the Capitol, the state capitol today, talking to different people. And as I was explaining, they had no idea about the city of Clarkston. But once I showed them the photos and stuff, oh, we'll go down, we'll go visit. But just take it in consideration. Everybody just come aboard and just do the right thing, because not only is that is history, this where everybody is sitting at now, this is part of history. This used to be a schoolhouse, an old schoolhouse set right on this property. So please take it in consideration. I know it's a tough decision, but everybody get on board and let's just do the right thing. Thank y'all for y'all support. Thank you.
Thank
you, Mayor.
Thank you. And who we have next?
Debbie Gathman.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, after that, it's Susie.
And who's after Debbie?
I'm very slow. I'm a slow walker now.
Maria Manita.
Okay, so Maria.
You want to have us line up?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna
okay.
do. Maria,
No,
you're not gonna speak? Okay. Who's next?
Susan Moore.
Susan Moore? That's you. Okay, who's next?
Dean Moore.
Okay, you're not talking anymore about this, right? Okay, thank you. Who's next?
Jean Hilliard.
Okay.
And that concludes the list.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Ready?
You're ready.
May I take Dean's spot? I didn't talk yet.
Okay, I'll let you do that.
Okay, I'm sort of confused about the order, but it's okay. I wanted to address the late night liquor when it comes up,
Right.
but I'm going to talk about this now.
Okay.
So is that how it's supposed to work?
Yes, so again, we're talking about this specific agenda
Just
item.
this, just
Right,
this. Okay,
right.
perfect. I am with Deborah on some things, which is that I want to know what the building's going to be useful for, because I like usefulness, but I think it could be a wham-bam nature center. I think we could do presentations there. We could do stuff around the building, especially associated with the gardening area. I've already had a big discussion with Michael about this because he would like to tear it down and do a giant rec center. And I said, well, couldn't we do a giant rec center over here? And over here, we'll have a nature center. I mean, I totally see how that could work. We could layer it together. It would take time to put it together, but there are a billion groups that would help. I already talked to Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. Both would like to be involved if we made it into a nature center. It's got a working bathroom, but I agree that it can't be an office space because it doesn't meet all that junk that you have to meet. I think it would be a great nature center, and I think it could also be a storytelling place because, you know, I'm all about that. We could put in a gazebo and have a storytelling spot. I think I see a total usefulness for that. I wouldn't want just a building like Tucker did. I don't like that. It seems like a waste of time and money. I want it to be a useful thing. So I'm done with that.
Thank you, Debbie.
And I have a million other ideas, but tonight just nature center.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, Miss Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Moore. I've lived in Clarkston for almost 30 years. And in all that time, I've walked through 40 Oaks 4 or 5 times every week with my dogs. For decades, there was a sign that said 40 Oaks Nature Preserve, and somewhere along the way, that changed to 40 Oaks Park. 40 Oaks is a nature preserve. We need to make every effort to preserve and protect that tiny sliver for wild things. There are a lot of wildlife that lives in 40 Oaks, including a small herd of white-tailed deer with a little spotted fawn that I saw recently, foxes, raccoons, numerous species of hawks and owls, songbirds. That tiny speck of land needs and deserves to be respected and preserved as a nature preserve. Not every place has to be designed and converted to a place for humans other than passing through and being observers. I'm not that concerned about the fate of the old farmhouse. I'm fine with whatever you decide, either restore it or tear it down and put an historic plaque. But at all costs, we should protect the wild things that call 40 Oaks home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jean Hilliard, and I am on the board of FOFO, as we're putting it. So I am one of the people that you're asking about. I have been a Clarkston resident for 20 years, a little over 20 years. And when I first moved here, we would walk through 40 Oaks. And what a gem. When was that house given to the city, that land? What year again?
2017.
Oh, the house and everything?
No, December 1972.
72.
So it gave to the county.
County. 1972. So it's been here in Clarkston since 1972. We cannot blame the current residents of Clarkston for the fact that it's fallen into such disrepair. As you put it, Lisa, who is very passionate about this, and I've been hearing about it for years, finally swooped in because she couldn't stand to see it go away. Have you ever been to the Foxfire Museum? It's up in Clayton, Georgia. It is an area where they moved cabins, they moved log cabins up there. And people come there and they walk through that place and it is beautiful and lovely. Let us have something like that right here. It's around the corner. I used to walk through there with my dogs all the time too. It's so lovely. It's right down the road. It's right next to a park. It's worth saving. I love the idea of keeping the community garden there, and there are so many things we can do to make it better. We haven't had a chance because it's just gotten to this point. We would love to have had a better plan for you, but we didn't know at this point coming tonight if it was going to be demolished tomorrow or as soon as possible. So to make all these plans and get the community involved when it might get torn down, we just want to know we have the opportunity. We can. We're not even really asking you for much money above and beyond what you've already slated. These people are willing to put forth the effort. Let them. We've all watched this fall apart in front of our eyes and become an eyesore, and it wasn't 20 years ago. Clarkston let this happen. Let's fix it. Thanks.
Thank you, Council. My name is Robin Sands. I am the newest member of the Historical Preservation Commission, but I'm speaking tonight as a citizen because Ashton and Dean and Lisa had all already done so much work on this, years of work and research that they've been preparing to restore this house. So I'm only going to talk to you about what I know. We passed out flyers asking for the community's feedback on what they would like to see done with this property and with this house, and asking them to just come forward and share with their voices. I was fortunate enough to spread the flyers out in my local neighborhood. So I got to talk to the people who live all around 40 Oak. The response I got from people was amazing. Mr. Rupert invited me into his house so I could see how his structure was like the 40 Oaks house. He showed me the changes. He showed me the wall that is still the reflection of what the outside wall looked like. The stories that I heard from all of the neighbors of the time they spent there and how much they loved that park were really touching, and they were overwhelming. I wish we'd had more time to get translations. We did hand them out to people and try to communicate as best we could, but I didn't have translations. We needed to do that. But the ideas that came forward from people as we were talking, they'd say, well, I don't know. And then say, well, we've thought about tying into the wildlife preserve and talking about the environment and about farming and about Clarkston history and about all the diverse groups that have joined into, and once you put an idea or two in front of them, their minds just took off on all the things they wanted to see for this place and the things that they thought they would like to see in Clarkston. I think there is a huge potential within this building. And I also want to say that the reason I have brought up my past a few times with some of the places I've lived that had historic houses. I'm not bringing that up because I want Clarkston to be those places. I left those places. I'm bringing that up because what I saw was a range of restoration. Some of them were very simple. One of the ones that was most popular was a single cell jail.
in Half Moon Bay, California. And it was just a small stucco building, 6 by 9 feet, bars across the front, so I assume prisoners were exposed to the elements. But people would line up to take their photo in there. It draws people in to see where a place has come from. So that is all I want to say, was my experience in meeting the neighbors and hearing about everything that they remember. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have former Councilman Awet Yasu, who was over the environmental chair as well, had his hand raised.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I couldn't be in person today. I'm under the weather, but I just want to quickly thank the commission and also the Friends of the Friendship Forest. Of the park for all the presentation that they did. I am totally supporter of the plan, including to preserve the main structure and possibly amending the demo to partial demolition of the addition structure and keeping the main structure and using it for historic purposes. And I think that is in line with what our city wants to do by preserving this very iconic building. And I think that might be a way for us in the future to also showcase our city. That would be a great addition. So please consider preserving the main structure. And from my memory, I have been there several times. I remember that the addition, which is the kitchen and the patio, are the ones that are in disrepair. And by demolishing those and keeping the main structure and improving it, I think that would be a great idea. And I'm really hoping that the council will consider that. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you, former Councilman Yasu. Now you're gonna help them, because I know we had that 7-point list that still has to happen. So you're gonna help them out with that too?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. And that should conclude everyone with the opportunity to speak. Okay, thank you, and thank you for the robust conversation. We'll move on to the next item, which is item 5B, which is to discuss an ordinance approving deannexation of parcel 18-0. Oh, I'm so sorry. Moved on. 4B, which is presentation of recommendations from the Community Development and Civic Innovation Standing Advisory Committee on City Council Task Force, committees, councils, and standing advisory committees. And that is chaired with Councilman Perkins and also with the Vice Chairman in terms of Vice Mayor Deborah Johnson. So Councilman Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I will be brief, probably briefer than, or hopefully briefer than actually describing the thing that we discussed. I'm just, since I think we had some tech issues, I'm just going to really give a bullet point summary of the background of this and then just read off our recommendation to the council. And so, as you know, earlier this year, we had some conversations through various work sessions and actual council meetings on the various task forces, standing advisory committees, councils, et cetera, that the city has. We have, I think, between 14 and 17, if you include Planning and Zoning, the Historic Preservation Commission, different civic engagement, you can call them entities. The problem is we have a ton of different language that we use to describe those. We use, committee to describe sort of three different things in their functions. Some are, sort of standing, they're ongoing. Some of them are set up to solve a particular problem. And a number of them actually had stipulations in the resolutions that set them up that expired 4 years ago. And so the goal of this initially was to sort of make us have a conversation. Instead of reappointing members to each of these, we did reappoint members to the standing advisory committees, but to make sure that, we're not just approving things, we're not just appointing, people to, entities that may or may not be functioning, but that we are doing things and just with clarity and making sure that we're being good stewards of the public's time and our city resources. So as we went through and we reviewed that, we discussed a bunch of different options. I'll summarize by saying, the conclusion of those discussions on our committee meetings were that, we have a lot more professional staff now than we had when a lot of these entities were set up. We have a social worker working with our police department now. We have an office of diversity, equity, and inclusion and empowerment. We have, a number of staff. We have a director of, Parks and Rec. And so looking at these different staff roles, we have full-time people who can dedicate their time to looking at, coming up with reports if we need them, and creating, community engagement events as needed for a lot of the things that these standing advisory committees, task forces, et cetera, were set up to accomplish. So I want to be really clear. The goal of this is not to eliminate public engagement. That's the last thing we want to do. But we've all heard the old adage, don't do a bunch of things, halfway, do one or two things well. So I think the goal here is to say, hey, let's streamline this and try and do a few things well so that it's clear to the public what the function of these different entities are. It's easy to know who to contact if you have a question about it. And you kind of know what you're being asked to do. If you are, decide you're interested in one of these, you kind of know what the function is. You know why you're in a meeting, for example. So our recommendation to the council, and I've talked with our interim city manager, Tammy Sadler-Jones, on this as well, just to make sure that, she felt they were in a good place to take this recommendation, is that we refer this matter to our interim city manager so that she and the rest of the staff can review it, look at the different roles that we now have that we may not have had when some of these different entities were set up, and come back with sort of a new version of what these committees could be in 2025. Do we need task forces, create some definitions around them? What roles are covered by staff? And then provide recommendations and relevant resolutions to the council of which of these entities are still necessary for the city's goals, and just to help facilitate good community engagement.
Okay.
And Vice Mayor Johnson, do you have anything to add as my co-chair?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Bell, you are also a member of that committee. I don't know if you had anything to add.
No additions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from the council? Yes. Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, I want to commend Councilmember Perkins for taking this on. It was needed, and I look forward to what recommendations our city manager has for us. So thank you for doing the deep dive in this. Appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to you and the whole committee. Thank you so much. Any other comments, questions? All right, hearing none. Did we have anyone signed up for this item? Okay, all right. So thank you for the presentation, which then leads us to. Yes.
List that I signed up over here, it didn't have the individual items listed on that to sign up for.
So do you want to speak?
Well, yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
I want to commend Councilman Perkins for taking this on as well. This is a great move for the city to clean house, to not have these standing advisory committees set up in vacuums that would have meetings without a lot of communication with the public and without bringing in members outside the community that would have specialized input for these things. And I would like to see this move forward as a community development process and not as a council insider kind of process that it's been in the past.
Thank you. Anyone else signed up? No one else? Thank you very much, which leads us in a good transition for 5A, which is to discuss the status and appointment to the City Council Task Force committees, council, and standing advisory committees. And that is Councilman Perkins again.
Thank you. So again, this will be pretty brief. We covered most of it in the presentation. So just from, to a couple points that were just made from a transparency standpoint, if you look in the agenda packet, it's about 4,000 pages long, give or take a few pages. We just included all the different resolutions that set these up. Really the question here is, do we want to go back and appoint members? Since this matter was referred to committee, it's back now. Do we want to appoint members to any of the task forces, or do we want to, fully accept the recommendations of the Standing Advisory Committee and defer this to staff? I did leave out one point, so apologies, which was a really important one, which is the timeline, which just to look at having all of these things set up for 2025. And so, if you have existing standing advisory committees, we're not killing them immediately. Those would go on through the end of the year, but then we'd be looking at just starting fresh, new year, new us, in 2025 with the recommendations from our city manager.
Okay, so council, do you want to just go ahead and defer all of this to the city manager? And we just keep things as they are, and then we'll move from there. Is that fine?
I'd like it.
Okay. Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, of course. And my understanding is she will be making a recommendation to council.
Correct.
Yes.
So we will, at some point when that's ready, we will be reviewing that and having our input on that. So yes, certainly.
Okay.
If I may, Madam Mayor.
Yes,
so it wouldn't necessarily be a renewal. Basically what we're doing is we're saying, all right, these things have been great. They've served their purpose. What do we need moving forward? And so, just for clarity's sake. So it wouldn't be necessarily doing it back. So it may involve, I'm sure we're not going to throw everything out, but we kind of retool some of these resolutions to better fit where we are as a city now. So,
Yeah, I think Councilwoman Bell and then.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that we need to put a timeline on this. If you want to start, if we want to try to revamp and establish these entities in fiscal year 2025, then we only have, what's the month? October, November, and December. So we need to be mindful of the recommendation to get it back to us, for us to make a decision and then move forward implementation.
So we'll need it at least for the November council meeting. So then we have December.
November work session or the November. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could also look at, I don't know if this would be a way of looking at it, because one of the things that I spoke with our city manager briefly on this as well, just to see, make sure I'm not adding more work to their to-do list without checking first. But, one thing we could ask for is just sort of recommendations in a general timeline. So one of the conversations we had is instead of, again, shutting everything down and then starting everything back up, is we take a little bit more of an iterative approach with it, where we start small and say, all right, we're going to kind of look at this. We're going to see how it goes without committees, and then we're going to say, all right, now we're seeing we actually have a need for some community engagement in this area. Does it need to be time limited, or does it need to be an ongoing, more of a standing, committee, things like that. So I don't know if that would be the pleasure of the council, be to say, hey, listen, can we kind of have just a general plan going forward? So we might start some in January,
right?
Start some mid year.
And usually we do that around the February meeting. So that would give her ample time from not only with her, but also working with staff. So, and city manager, I know you're online. City Manager Jones.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I do appreciate you allowing us a little bit of extra time, because I do want the council to be mindful. We got the budget coming up, and we have some other city events. So as you mentioned, if you will allow us the opportunity, the staff and I have actually already started working on this in anticipation of this agenda item. So we've met one time. We will meet again later this month. So in order to come back with a good workable plan, one that's accurate, I will say, as Councilman Perkins mentioned, maybe we come back with the timeline to you maybe in another 60 days. I would like to get past the budget. Right. And the budget is expected to be adopted the first meeting in November, which because of the election is going to be November 7th. So after that takes place.
Okay. Council, is that good for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Did we have anyone signed up for this item? Dean Moore, did you want to talk about this one?
Just from my brief history in the city, back in 2010 when I came on council, I was naive. People were being appointed as chair and co-chair of the committees. And I thought that meant that they were going to go out and get information and bring it back to us as council members to give us things that we could discuss and talk about. But as I found out at that time, when somebody was appointed as a chairperson and a co-chair, the chairperson thought they were the department head. And so they were trying to direct the staff. And since then, I've seen some other committees that would bring things up in their committee meetings and make decisions about things to go back to the council, but they weren't getting new information. They were taking their own plans and desires for the city and going back and saying, this is what we recommend as a committee, but it was really that individual. So hopefully this will eliminate that sort of conflict and get more community involvement with town hall meetings, things like that, where everybody gets involved and plans the city together and brings information to the council to make decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, if there are no other comments and no one online, we'll close this agenda item out and refer this one to the city manager.
Do you want to have a consent or?
So from a consent, we'll have to change this to say that it will be referred to the city manager for 60 days because she wanted it 60 days. So, Madam Clerk, does that work for you? Okay, and so we will do this as a consent. Is that fine for everyone? All right, thank you. So just for those who are here, when we do not have to deliberate anymore, we will put an item on consent agenda, meaning that we'll just vote on all of those things at one time. I just want to make sure I take this opportunity to educate people so we have new folks in the audience and sometimes online. We'll move on to 5B, which is to discuss an ordinance approving deannexation of parcel 18-095-09008, also known as 1078 Nielsen Drive. And Mr. Quinn.
So this is an item that the council approved earlier this year. There was a recent amendment to the state law concerning de-annexation, whereas the law had always been that the city acts first and then the county would act to agree or not, and if they agreed, the property's de-annexed. In 2023, there was a new law passed by the Georgia General Assembly that I didn't note at the time, and it just changed the order. So also, to give a little more background, unbeknownst to me and perhaps you, DeKalb County had, although they didn't communicate with us, they were actually very responsive to the de-annexation request from the two Nielsen Drive property owners. And that resulted in one of the two properties, the county acted first, which is the new requirement, and then the city acted. So that one's complete. On the other one, the county acted after the city. So we need to act again so that this action will be after the county's action, which will then complete de-annexation of the parcel identified in the agenda.
Okay, so this is just more procedural.
It's a do-over to put it in the right order, yes.
Okay, all right. Are there any questions? None? Okay. All right. Did we have anyone signed up for this one? Okay, no one signed up for it? Okay. So with this, is that okay for consent agenda? All right, this will also go into consent agenda. Thank you. The next item, which is 5C, and that is to discuss an ordinance to allow temporary or permanently new package alcohol license. And Mr. Quinn.
Thank you. So at our last work session a month ago, the council asked me to provide options if you were to decide to modify or reverse the existing policy expressed in ordinance from 2016, which is that there are no new package alcohol permits available in the city of Clarkston. When I say package alcohol permits, I'm referring to sale of beer, malt, beverage, wine, and distilled spirits by the bottle or can to a customer that takes it away, opens it, and drinks it somewhere else. In 2016, the council, a majority of the council at that time, desired to enact a policy whereby those types of licenses would not be issued anymore. And at that time, there was included in the ordinance a grace period till 2023, I believe, to transfer licenses. Transferring a license means basically substituting the individual that's associated with an alcohol license and keeping the business the same. That expired, and it had not been allowed since 2016 to just get a brand new license for packaged alcohol. So I prepared 2 ordinances drafts in response to the council's request, and you have them in your packet designated as option A and option B. So option A would create what I call a grace period. It would basically allow new package alcohol licenses for a temporary amount of time. And that could be, a month. It could be till the end of the year. It could be for a year or 2 years or whatever the council thinks is a good policy. Option B would basically reverse the 2016 ordinance so that now package alcohol licenses can be obtained freely just as they were prior to 2016. I think with option A, there may be ideas that the council has that I didn't think of in terms of different kinds of limitations or conditions. But what we have drafted is basically setting up a period of time where these licenses could be obtained. And in the draft document for option A, the council would have a choice basically to limit that to locations where alcohol is currently sold by the package or not.
Okay, and that concludes your...
That concludes my introduction. Happy to answer questions and talk through it as desired.
Okay, council. What is your pleasure in terms of the 2 options, option A or option B?
I'll take December 31st, 2024.
Okay.
So from now until this, is the hours done, Stephen?
That would be a viable choice, yes. I think, alcohol licenses are, they run with the calendar, so it makes a lot of sense to have this happen at the end of the year.
Okay. Councilwoman Hood, what's your desire? Mike, put your mic on.
Not in favor of B. I think that was a good decision and continues to be a good decision. So if the date is December 31st, 2024, what does that mean? What does that end?
So what that means is that Well, we'll need to also decide whether we want this to apply to every properly zoned parcel in the city or only the ones where alcohol packages are sold today. But so setting that aside, what it would mean is that potential licensees would need to file a application for a 2024 package alcohol license and get it approved by the end of the year. So if we're going to create this ordinance at our meeting next week, then I don't know, we might want to ask our city clerk who's on the alcohol review task force if applications that came in October could be processed in time for the December city council meeting. Let's just say that they could be, and that was the date that we chose for purpose of discussion. Then anyone who got approved during this window would then be grandfathered and be able to renew. And so for 2025, they could renew their license. They could not expand the kind of alcohol that they had permission to sell beyond what they had in 2024. They could not expand the physical building or the percentage of it that's dedicated to alcohol. That's kind of a summary of what that would look like.
Okay.
And then the issue of limiting it to the existing location, that this would, if there was already a package store, all right, so it wouldn't expand. All right, yes, I think I could support that, and understanding what date we would put on that would be important.
Okay. Councilman Carroll?
Seems like this legislation predated my time in the council. It seems like the desire was to essentially cap the number of licenses for selling, malt liquor to be consumed somewhere besides the premises in Clarkston. And if that's the goal, it seems like to me that we should just put a cap on those licenses and not say, if someone dies or retires, that license can't be passed down, which is essentially what the current law is. Because the current law, not to be morbid, but eventually all the holders of the current of these licenses will die or retire, and then it would essentially forbid any liquor stores in Clarkston, which I don't know if that's the intent, to just forbid it, period, of the long run, or if the intent is just to cap it. Because it seems like the intent is just to cap it, we should just say, this is the number of licenses, period, this is the amount of floor space, period, and you can put it wherever it fits in the zoning, but you can't have more than this. You could only get a new one if somebody else dropped out or if someone else, transferred theirs to yours. So it seems like that is kind of the intent rather than just to strangle it entirely. So that's why I was kind of thinking that it'd be maybe a better option if we limited it to, this is the number of licenses that's allowed, period, not more. But I don't know if it necessarily makes sense to say you can't transfer a license as long as it's not expanding the licenses above what we already have.
Can we limit, or is that an option?
Well, I think it's a legal authority that we have, but I think that could present some problems that that would make me a little uncomfortable. Specifically, that let's just say that there are 25 places in Clarkston that sell alcohol by the package right now, and we say that the limit in Clarkston is 25. So now, presumably, folks who are interested in engaging in that business are watching for one or more of these to go out of business, and then so would we basically be beholden to the first applicant, or how would
all the legal
right
requirements.
So
if they don't, then they can't.
Yeah, I think that would be one way to do it, for sure. I think the city has a lot of discretion over granting alcohol licenses, and I don't think that anyone would argue that 25 in a city of this size is unreasonable. the policy that they wanted to pursue in 2016 is not necessarily relevant because this council is who's elected to make the policy now. At that time, they wanted what Mr. Carroll said, that over time individuals would die or move away and the businesses would go away.
Yep. So A or B?
I mean, I would support B if it had the modification that didn't allow an increased number of licenses.
Okay.
Because I think that makes more sense than, essentially strangling the businesses, people die and retire.
Okay. Noted. Councilman Perkins? Your A or B?
I'm still chewing on it. I think I'd be okay with either option. Jamie asked the question I was going to ask, or Councilman Carroll asked the question I was going to ask. So,
Okay.
Well, sorry, just
no, go ahead.
what Mr. Carroll said kind of makes me think of an option C, which would be to allow them to be transferred, but not new licensees after the grace period, right? So, and that's what the council did
Right.
in 2016,
Right.
and they said until 2023, which at the time I guess seemed like a long time.
Long
but-
time for us.
And here we are. Right. So you could just allow the transfers, and that way it's, if an older individual needs to retire or passes away, then it would be controlled by their business partners or family members or whatever, and they could come in for the transfer. And that would have the effect of limiting the number and limiting the locations, both of those. But it would kind of liberalize it in the sense that they would persist over time.
Okay, so now we have that option C, which we like option C. Who likes option C?
This is follow up to the option C. So is there anything that we would need to include in that language? For example, could transferring licenses be used to escape penalties in any way? I know there have been some issues with that in the broader county from a code enforcement standpoint with properties. So are we kind of up creek without a paddle with that, or what can we put in there to protect ourselves from that?
Well,
Sorry, and transferees, for example, someone buys a business, doesn't realize there's a ton of fines connected to it. I don't have that whole process fresh in my mind. So, go
So
ahead.
to make sure that that person is in good standing,
Right.
on both ends, whether they have any obligations to the city, county, or however, and also, I guess to your point, the person who's getting both parties. So to make sure we have that language in there, that they have no obligations or existing.
Right. So like that, in order to execute the transfer, you would have to pay off any outstanding fines, and the premises would have to pass a code inspection. We certainly can require that if we're not already. I'll have to check. Because, we do have other kinds of alcohol licenses that can be transferred.
Okay.
But can I ask one follow up on that?
One follow up and then.
Is that okay? On that, is there any way to do that on the front end as well? And so I think, a situation that we'll be discussing here shortly, where someone wasn't aware, of that, is there a way to sort of put that language into our permitting requirement? It's like, hey, if you are trying to transfer this, I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yes. I think that, so one thing that's in the draft of the option A was to send a certified letter to every current license holder that explains to them the limits on their license, and we keep a record of that. So if they sell it to someone without informing them, then that record would create a civil action for the buyer that didn't get what they bargained for. So we could absolutely add language on our application form as well as in our ordinance that would inform the transferee of the duty to make good on any outstanding obligations of the transferor, and they would also presumably have that presented to them by the staff, in order to get past that level of the alcohol review board.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Actually, that should be by the business permit first, right? Because the business permit comes before the alcohol.
Yeah. That sounds right to me.
Okay, so Vice Mayor Johnson.
Mr. Quinn, my concern is this verbiage. Do we have to use the word transfer since a alcohol license can't technically be transferred? Because I think that's what's confusing people. Is it you can't transfer an alcohol license if you sell the business. You have to apply for a new. So
We can use any language that we think would be most clear and helpful. I mean, to me, you can transfer an alcohol license if that's allowed. So let's say that I own ABC package and my brother, and I'm licensed. So every alcohol license is associated with a business, but also an individual that's responsible for it. And so I own ABC package, and my brother wants to become the licensee and take over the business. That's where a transfer would happen. He would still be ABC package, but now instead of Stephen being the licensee, it would be Jim. And so that is a defined term in the ordinance. But if we have an alternate language that
I
would be
thought
better.
we were dealing more with the selling of the property altogether.
Well, when that occurs, that's not a transfer.
Okay.
Because you haven't just substituted the individual licensee, you've substituted the whole business.
Okay. Okay.
One other thing.
Yes.
So I was going to say that I don't know. I agree that we need a cap on the limits and maybe cap on transfer, but I wonder if we can do that without sticking them to a geographic location. Because as long as they don't expand the amount that's sold for alcohol, I wouldn't want to forbid a package store from selling to redevelop for a non-package store use and then just moving their business down the street. As long as they comply with existing zoning and they comply with all the other alcohol license regulations, and they don't expand the amount of floor space that goes to alcohol, I would be okay with them moving and not necessarily tying them to that location forever. But I would just want to not increase the number of licenses.
Right.
So.
Right. I think that's a bigger thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective. That I will need to give some thought to that one in terms of, I think that will require additional modifications to the code because it talks a lot in there about these licenses being tied to the location. It's a surmountable thing if that's how we want to do it.
Right. I just don't think there's any benefit to making them geographically stay in one location, never redevelop it. If they want to, if there's a higher, better use for that property, I don't think there's a reason why the city needs to force it to be stayed to use as a package store.
Right.
So that's.
So to Councilman Carroll's point, maybe what we need as far as this particular item is to deal with this till December 31st and allow you more time based on the conversations that we've been having to gather the information and make sure that we update the code to reflect option C and to take those different points. For example, if someone decides to move, how does all of that take into account?
That's a great idea.
Okay. And I'm gonna let you got one more. I'm gonna let Councilwoman Bell and then back to you.
So I agree with my colleague's sentiments thus far. I do think, Stephen, though, we have to figure out with the language to separate the license from the business, which in my mind is the larger issue because of how it was written before. And I don't like the dates and the timeline of stop or start because I think the next council are gonna have to go through it and review it too based off of who's elected, right? And what their desires are. I do think that it should be on a case-by-case basis, and I think a lot of the language needs to be in the application on the front end so that people are aware of what is expected of them, how they have to be as far as standard and compliance. And then I don't think that, I know that it was just made a suggestion of the December 31st day to give you more time for it, but I mean, ideally I like option C. Ideally I like it with the parameters that we just discussed and make sure it's on the application and whoever it is knows what is required of them, even if the person they bought the property from did not express that to them. And then I do think that one of the things here when I was reading the two options that you gave us, Stephen, is I want to make sure that if it's a new licensee, they don't have the challenges of applying to get a license just because of the transfer situation and the timeline. Like, I don't want to see that at all. In my personal perspective, I think it's a case-by-case basis. We have zoning requirements, so it's not like you can get a new liquor store or a new package store next door, and that's already on our map. So I like option C. I do think it needs to be on the application. I do think that the verbiage needs to express if you buy a business or if you transfer a license, and that needs to be clear in the draft that you're drafting, because those are two different situations in my opinion, and so the stipulations are completely different. I want to make sure people are aware of what does that mean, and then what is the protocol that they must follow after that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. The one part I wasn't sure about is when you said that you didn't want the new licensee to have to apply if it was a transfer. Or maybe I misunderstood that.
No. They need to apply, but the protocol in which they need to apply needs to be completely different if they bought a whole entity and it's not a direct transfer. Like to your explanation of Stephen and Jim, I think that's what you use.
I just made them up, so yeah.
So I want to make sure that is clear so we don't have this, but I don't want the dates at all. Like I don't want a start time and an end time, because that's going to bring us back here.
Right.
Whoever's next selected.
Okay. Can I repeat what I've taken away?
Yep.
So we want to go with what we've described as option C, in which between the enacted date of October next Tuesday and the end of 2024, new licensees can obtain a license at a location that currently has that license. And then there will not be, and transfers will be freely allowed. What a transfer means is that a new individual subs in for the licensed individual and continues operating the business. Then we will revisit in early 2025 some other ideas about perhaps letting them relocate as long as we don't get more.
That's fine. So the only reason why I even brought up the option A to the end was to make sure you had enough time to get all of that together.
Right.
But if you have enough time,
I can get option C ready to go as long as they stick to the same location for the rest of the year, and then we can revisit that. But I just wanted, if I may, to ask Ms. Mitchell if she believes that applications that come in October would be ready for a council vote in December, because these can only be granted by the city council. Or do we need to add more time?
Is it pertaining to, this is pertaining to new and?
New license at an existing location. So it'd be a new licensee. We'd do the background check.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
We can.
okay. All right, and Councilman Perkins.
I was just basically going to say I'm in support of the option C, but I think sounded like we were okay with removing the date on it and just saying as long as it stays in the same location, we don't have an increase. It still allows us to explore Councilman Carroll's thing. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes, everybody. Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, I would like to receive information about how many package stores we have within the corporate limits of the city.
Five.
And I think this discussion seems to be around the issue of, are we going to keep by the transfer or saying you can get a license in the same place? Are we going to keep the number of package stores we have? Or are we going to have a situation, which I think the ordinance of 2016's intent was, that over time the number of package stores was reduced? Because that whole thing about, you know, a deadline for when these things could be transferred, et cetera, seemed to indicate that the intent was that the number go down over time. So that's why I'd like to know the number of package stores in the city.
Five.
We're certainly not allowing any more.
Right.
But do we want a structure that says if a package store goes out of business, then it cannot continue?
Right.
Well, that's what the 2016 sounded like it was designed
No,
to.
no, that was, and to that point, it was really, we were looking at things from a social justice perspective and looking at where we were as a community, having a lot of issues in terms of a lot of pawn shops, a lot of alcohol places, and just making sure in terms of the situation we had within the community. We had a lot of suicides with people in terms of the coin machines. We had a lot going on.
But
and so looking, go ahead.
Didn't it, the way it was drawn with that grace period and the end of the grace period meant that over time, if a package store went out of business, then it could not, or it was that it could not be transferred. That the business could be sold, but they couldn't get a liquor license.
Right.
So I think that's still a question that we need to decide when we're making the decision about this.
Okay, so I think with what you have, we have the ability to transfer, correct?
Option C I have down as allowing transfers indefinitely.
Right. Okay. So transfers are indefinitely.
So that would, however many we have now, could stay.
Right. Okay. Councilman Perkins, Councilman Bell.
Well, the only thing I'll say to that is I think that this is why it gets convoluted and quite perplexing. We're associating an entity and a space with allowable usage based off our zoning requirement. We can't do that, y'all. Like, what is allowable is allowable. Right. Despite if that business goes out, if somebody else buys that property and decides that they want to reinstate a liquor store, we can't say, hey, no, but then allow it in our zoning code, right? That doesn't, you can't conflate the two. My thought process is, I don't want those dates on there, Stephen. I don't think we should put limitations on when they can apply and when they can transfer. We're going to come right back into this issue again, if that is the case. The other thing that I'll say is, I think that we have to say transfer versus business establishment and detach them from, because I think people are still conflating the two. If you transfer, or to Susan's point, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Hood's point, if the business go out of business, right, can somebody else go back in, reinstate another liquor store, and what will be the issue? I think we have to put in that ordinance somewhere that this city will not allow any additional package stores. So we got 5, that's all we have. And that may be another ordinance, Stephen, altogether. And you know, I've done plenty of moratoriums on other things. But if that's going to stop to address, I know that doesn't address the social issue. As a licensed clinical social worker, we can have 3 liquor stores and still have some of the same issues that we've had in the past, right? So that's not a solution to the problem that they were trying to provide a solution for. But I do think we could put guardrails on not having an influx of them and being this stop and go city in between.
Right.
So I think that we have to put a limitation on how many we have. We have to take the guardrails off, in my perspective, on when people can apply and transfer. And then we have to designate the difference between you buying a business and utilizing what's in the zoning code versus transferring from a grandfather perspective. Does that make sense, y'all?
Yes. It's a complicated issue. I mean, the zoning, you expressed a good argument for why we have vested rights under zoning. And so any kind of business that's not specifically licensed by the city, like specially licensed, like alcohol, then I agree with what you said, Councilmember Bell, that it doesn't matter who's running it. It just matters for zoning purposes that the use is what was established before the prohibition came into effect. For alcohol licenses, they are annual and personal. And so legally, that's zoning analysis it's only one thing to look at out of several. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible to ever have the 2016 ordinance that the council wanted at that time. So we have to we have to include a date for if the council wants to accommodate the other item on our agenda.
Right.
That is not a transfer. That's a new license at an existing location for a new business. So if part of our goal here is to make it possible to grant that license, then we're going to need to change the code to allow new package licenses. And unless you want to allow those in an unlimited way, then we're going to need to put a date in there in the short term. However, that will then expire, and it'll just say there are no new package licenses in Clarkston, and they can be transferred freely. That was option C.
But that's why I said that there have to be a designation between transfer and new business, because to your point, that is a new business. The only reason I brought up the zoning point is because we can't just not allow people to start new business because the old one goes away. That's the case, right? So that's why I brought up that point.
Well, they need to be informed.
Right.
And then the solution is simple. A business that's been set up to sell alcohol at a particular location can just be sold rather than the location and the stock being sold. I mean, it's a legal technicality that can very easily be complied with if everyone knows the state of play.
Right.
So how do we do that?
I think we send a registered letter, the two-step approach. Registered letter to all current licensees, and we develop an information sheet that the City Hall staff has that they give to anyone who's interested in anything like this, that we explain it as you have to use a certain level of legalese, if you will, in an ordinance that we don't have to use in an information sheet. And so I'll get somebody besides me that speaks more plainly to help express it in a way that anyone can understand, hopefully. And I think that would help a lot.
Right. And then on top of that, we need to update our SOPs so that if, for example, the clerk is not available and someone else is there, or whoever is doing that, they also have that information, or whoever's responsible for permits as well as for the licenses, that internally they understand that process too.
Right. One other thing on the date. So if the goal is to just allow these briefly, the new licenses, I think we need to shorten the date and make it like October 31st to apply, so that we can have any of these that do apply on our December regular meeting, because otherwise we're not going to have a chance to grant it during 2024. And so I think that if we pass the ordinance on Tuesday, I will get ready between now and then the letter that goes to all the licensees. And that should be hand delivered to every one of their businesses. And it'll say, this is a new ordinance. This is your opportunity if you intend or desire to sell your business or to quit operating here and let someone else take over, and they're not going to buy your business but just start working at the same place, then you need to get this application in by October 31st.
Okay. Council, any other comments on that? Nope. Okay. You know what you got to do?
I think so.
Okay. And we can follow up. Anything else on this? Anyone signed up for this one? Madam Clerk? Okay. Did anyone sign up for it? I just want to make sure I get all the people who signed up for it. I signed up for this and the next item. Okay. Councilman Iyasu, former Councilman Iyasu. Okay, we'll come back to him. Who's next? I think that's Lisa. All right, Miss Lisa. Okay.
Hi, I'm Lisa Morshower. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Berman, Fink, Van Horn, and I actually represent Ms. Patel, who's got an application pending before you. And I'm a former City of Atlanta city attorney, and I was over all of licensing from 1990 to 2000, just after 2000, like the middle of 2001, was a long time. I've written a lot of code sections. So I am delighted to hear y'all talking about this. I have a lot of clients who sell alcohol. I do think that there's a distinction between a transfer and the change of owner. It's a change of ownership. That's really the wording that is used in a lot of code sections. So I think that would be important to put into the code when you do it. And I do think if you want to, and I'm giving you advice, if you want to limit the number, you could go into your zoning code and do it that way. But I don't think doing it the way that y'all did it wouldn't necessarily hold up in court. So I think I'm glad y'all are having this discussion. I think it's a great discussion, and your attorney's thinking through it all. So my vote would be option C, and using the words change of ownership so that existing license holders could sell their businesses, because I think there's a property right interest involved if they can't. So that would, and then you could limit, I mean, you don't have to add new licenses if you don't want to. I think you could limit it. But I love that y'all are talking about it, and I'm thankful for it. So thank you.
Okay, good. All right, who's next? All right, Mr. Moore, former Councilman Moore.
When you say package stores, are you saying the alcohol store, or are you talking about convenience stores?
Package stores.
Okay, so you're just talking about liquor stores. And we have 5 liquor stores in the city. Because the moratorium was dealing with, like you said, the coin-operated amusement machines that were used for gambling. And some of our convenience stores were not selling merchandise. It was on the shelf past their recommended due date. And alcohol was being consumed at the same time that these co-am machines were being operated. And apparently, the people that were playing these were poor people. And so they were dedicated to winning money, and they were being provided some form of credit, because the suicides we had were people that were owing more than $3,000. One was $7,000.
I'm gonna put a pin in there just to make sure we focus on alcohol store. So alcohol, this is to talk about alcohol.
Okay, so just the 5 stores. I think that's plenty of stores for a city this size.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Something that comes to my mind about this is perhaps we could look at our 5 stores now and our population, and over time we can have, so we're at 15,000 or so now, we have 5, that's 1 per 5,000 or per whatever the math turns out. And so in 10 years, if we're at 20,000, then we can increase it by the same percentage, just something to think about.
Thank you. And make sure you state your name.
Hi, I'm Jean Hilliard.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jean. All right, yes.
But it seemed like the council had, maybe I misread, but I think the council had a positive reaction in terms of allowing treating a change of ownership and a transfer the same. I mean, is that something that is a meaningful distinction to y'all, or I know that Ms. Bell wanted to treat them the same. It sounds like that's.
Is that fine for everyone?
Because that would really simplify things, I think. And we could just do that, and we wouldn't even have to do any date. We would just say that you can change ownership and you can transfer, but you can't get a new one.
Right.
That's okay. That's easy.
Okay.
Great.
Right.
We got to the easy place the hard way. And then the last thing I wanted to say, just to make sure we all knew, is the regulation we're talking about does apply to the convenience stores too. Like when the city clerk said there's 5 package stores, she meant the ones that sell liquor.
Right.
But our existing code will not allow a new license to sell beer at a convenience store.
Okay. That's good too. And I'll let Ms. Cameron and then Ms.
And I won't be long. I just want to, for the zoning purposes, please, if we can use modern words, change of ownership. If you use that word transfer, it's going to be very confusing. And it's not a term that we use today. If we can just, if the policy can be set and let staff do the SOPs city clerk, the zoning compliance on my end, it would help a whole lot if we are to, if going forward, because most of the people, when you say transfer, you're thinking they have to qualify, right?
Right.
And so you will have individuals thinking that they can just transfer, if they purchase a business, they can transfer that license from that individual. They would think that they can just transfer that license instead of qualifying for it. So we want to use modern words that's going to be user-friendly, that everyone can understand.
So I take it that staff will work with our legal department to ensure that the
Thank you.
wording is correct. Okay, thank you. And Clerk Mitchell?
Former Councilmember Yasu is ready to speak.
Okay, former Councilman Yasu?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So since I was in the council at that time, I think I was the only one who actually voted against it. And my rationale was exactly what we're talking about, option C. I think option C is the most viable one because if we don't have a way of allowing businesses to actually sell their business, it basically hampers them and reduces the value of their business, that they can't sell, but they can only keep it. And
Did we lose you? Did we lose him? Okay, so we're all on good for option C. All right. Okay, with that, you have some work, and this definitely will not be on consent agenda. So, but thank you all for a very robust conversation and coming to a good end. With that, we will now go to D, which is to discuss an alcohol license application for
Recording in progress.
Mancy 7311 LLC DBA Lulu's Package located at 3900 E Ponce de Leon Avenue, Clarkston, Georgia 30021, and Clerk Mitchell.
This item was transferred to this work session from last month's work session. Just to give a quick review, the Alcohol Review Committee received and reviewed the alcohol license application from owner Mancy Patel, business name Mancy 7311 LLC, for an alcohol license at Lulu's Package to sell beer, wine, malt beverages, and distilled spirits for retail package sales. The location is to be considered for the alcohol licenses 3900 East Ponce de Leon Avenue, Clarkston 30021. The ARC determined all required inspections and all required background checks have been passed, and the location complies with the proximity requirements. This item does fall under the 2016 ordinance discussed in the previous item.
Okay, thank you. And when we make the changes from the previous agenda item, that will take care and allow us, if we want to go ahead to move forward with approving this alcohol application. Mr. Quinn? Okay. Is there any further discussion from the council? Okay. Would you like to say a few words? I'll allow you to say a few words if you want to. Okay, no problem. Yes, go ahead.
Just for the record, I'm Lisa Marshauer. I'm an attorney for Ms. Patel, and we would be very happy if you could approve her application. She does meet all the requirements. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone signed up for this item?
Not on the list, however, Dean Moore is.
No, he okay. All right, so this may not need to be on consent until we approve the item before. Yes, Vice.
To apologize that we don't have some of our processes in place to the point where you would have been notified of when you tried to get your business license. So at this point, me personally, Madam Mayor, I would like for the item to be on consent agenda because we're gonna do what we're gonna do anyway. And she's been penalized for something she had no control over. And I don't expect somebody buying something to know our laws and expect the person selling it to them to give them that information. So we need to anchor down on some of our processes, and I like the certification part of this item C, Exhibit C, but yes, we dropped a ball here somehow, some way, and our residents and business owners are being.
Yes, Clerk Mitchell. You weren't here.
I would like to state for the record that on the checklist in the first page of each application, the second item reads, please read and understand the city alcohol's beverage ordinance, chapter 3 of the Code of Ordinances.
Is it printed on there?
It's printed on the checklist.
No, not the ordinance, the verbiage.
The entire code, chapter 3?
Yes, because I don't even know if they would know where to go find chapter 3. Honestly, I'm not saying that I like what you have on the application, but I can't go to Muni Code and find everything I'm looking for, and I've been on the council for a minute.
Okay.
For real.
So because procedurally, that has to be passed before we can do anything in terms of approving the actual license. While we might want to have it as a consent, technically we have to make sure that we approve the previous item in order for us to move forward with that. Is that correct, Mr. Quinn? Okay, thank you. So with that, anything else? Okay, so we'll have this as on the agenda for a vote. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is to discuss E, which is to discuss a resolution awarding a contract to the most responsive and responsible bidder, Southern Demolition LLC, for the demolition of the 2-story house at 40 Oaks Nature Preserve in the amount of $39,750 to be funded out of SPLOST 2 funds. And Mr. Moody?
Good evening. This was tabled from August, I believe. So this is just coming back to you for, I don't know if the word assessment, after all the robust communication before, but this is back to look for approval for demolition or whatever the next step will be after tonight.
And a question, because you did hear some very robust discussions about only demolishing the additions to the building. Would this demolition, would it still just cover that and keep the main, or is that an option or no?
That's a totally different project.
Okay.
So if you go that route, we would have to cancel this, do all the engineering plans, put a new bid out just for removal of said structures on that property.
Okay, I just want to make that clarity out there for everybody. Any questions or comments from the council on this item? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Moody. Did we have anyone signed up for this one? Okay. Councilwoman Hood?
Yes, I would just urge, based on the previous discussions, is that this not be approved, that we consider the possibility of getting a quote for the demolition of those parts of the structure that were added later, and that we not make a decision on the historic part of the house at this time. There's nothing compelling us to demolish the whole structure at this time. I think the community, the setting up and doing what they have done, the nonprofit, et cetera, I think that that the best course of action is to allow enough time to continue to work on this, and I think the community would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hood. Did we have anyone signed up for this item, Clerk Mitchell?
Not online.
Okay, anyone in the room? Anyone? Okay, all right, so with that, we'll just have this as a regular agenda item. Unless the council, well, I know it's not going to be a consent, so we already have this as a regular agenda item. So I just want to make sure that's clear. We'll move on to item 5F, which is to discuss an ordinance to amend Chapter 3 of the Code regarding alcohol beverages to allow late night sales for consumption on the premises, subject to certain conditions. And I know that had Councilwoman Bell next to it. I know that it was brought up in Councilman Carroll.
I'll be brief because we discussed this quite extensively. But essentially, this went to the Public Safety and Legal Committee, and the committee consensus was that late night sales should be allowed, but there needs to be some specifics or specificity around designation, location, potential phase processes, instead of every business being based off their establishment history and analysis of sales and protocols of city admin over time. Even there was a suggestion around a nightmare, because that's what some of the cities have that have extension of there's a whole phase. However, nonetheless, there have been tons of discussion. There have been tons of discussions in regards to recommendations that are amicable suggestions, which include an application process to receive a permit that will be open for a month period, and that the hours would last for a 2-year trial period that would be terminated if not renewed by the council. There also were suggestions around a sworn officer being on site for these businesses that have late night sales from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. And then there was clauses around a permit being revoked if there are proven noise violations or code violations, and identify a feasible sound level limits between 50 and 70 decibels based off research, and making sure that the venues, if this moves forward, would have some type of component of soundproof to get permitted. And that's all I have.
Okay. Is there any further discussion from the council on this item? Okay. Yes, Councilwoman Hood.
Councilmember Bell, are you proposing an ordinance that would include all of the things you just discussed? Yes.
Yeah. So those were suggestions that were made after the discussion in regards to parameters and protocol and processes put alongside if we deem to move forward with the late night sales.
So it would allow late night sales to what hours?
Yeah. So it still would fall into the parameters. Let me see. So based off of the suggestions that I got here, that they would still fall into the late night hours until the 4 a.m. But it would be only under the condition if they had a sworn officer on site from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. And then also clauses around permit being revoked for certain proven noise and code violations. And then identifying feasible sound level decibels between 50 and 70 decibels, which was acceptable. And then also the venue actually having some type of soundproof component. Now, these were just conditions associated with if that moved forward, that those businesses that have to still apply and still have to be permitted with those conditions would be allowable usage.
So this would be, they would apply for this.
Permit.
For the permit. Mm-hmm. And they would have to comply with all of the conditions.
Yes. Well, whichever
and
ones
they
we
could
agreed
stay
upon.
Okay. Didn't we do that before? We required security on site, police officer. There was, gunfire over there. Who is going to monitor at Pond Sports?
This is for all of this is for everybody, not.
I know, I'm talking about, but clearly this relates primarily to one site. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be other sites. But we've been down this road. It didn't work. Who's going to monitor the decibel level?
Well, so just for a point of clarity. So there were stipulations that were advised to those businesses, but if you go back and read the ordinance that we have upon us in this packet, there are no specifications in regards to the hours in which they have to have a sworn officer there. And the bigger issue here is that this is not for one business. This is citywide.
Citywide, I understand.
And
Okay.
this is also to ensure that everybody has the consistency of the compliance of it that is in the actual ordinance. And as I mentioned, once getting a permit, it can be revoked, and it's a trial period, right? Of not any consistency of it, which is also not in this ordinance. And then in addition to that, it's there was no testing of noise decibels, but that's something that we can require them to do, and then actually come up with a process internally in order to ensure that they're following in between that. And they have to be approving noise and code violation process, which also goes back to admin. That's also not in this ordinance.
Okay.
Okay.
I will respectfully disagree that the decibel level can be monitored and reported by the business. But using an example of the only place in town that we have now that has late night hours, there would be complaints about the noise level, and before the police could get there, they would just turn down the noise and then they would turn it back up. So we've been, in my humble opinion, we've been down this road before and it did not work. I think 4 o'clock is way too late for any establishment and that sells alcohol. If the will of the council is to go down this road again, kick the can, I would at least hope that the hour could be rolled back from 4 a.m. to something 3 a.m., 2:30, something like that.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Any other comments from the council? Councilman Carroll.
One thing I would say is that I think that there needs to be a limited window for any application as well, to limit it just to a month, because I don't think we should open it up for just indefinite other people applying. So I would say a month and a trial period. And the way that I kind of think of this is a transition to when we're going to hopefully create a district that only allows this, because there's kind of a strict 2-year limit. So I think that this is a transition period for Clarkston businesses saying, you know, hey, this is allowed for right now, but you have to satisfy all these noise standards. You have to prove that you're soundproofed. And then we're transitioning, hopefully having an entertainment district that will only be downtown, that will just be for these hours there. And so that's the way I kind of think of this as a transitional ordinance.
Okay. Yes, Vice Mayor Johnson.
All of these requirements are going to be evaluated and documented within that 30-day application process?
They would have to show that their business is soundproofed within that. They'd have to apply, and then as part of the application process. I mean, they have to apply within 30 days. It may take longer than 30 days to prove they're soundproofed. But they
And
have to get the
after 2
application in.
years, they come back to council, and what happens?
And then hopefully we'll establish an entertainment district downtown.
And if we haven't, what happens? I'm just asking.
And it just expires. I mean,
It just,
could
so
be,
they won't
yeah,
be
it
able
could be
to
a
do it
future
again?
council. I mean, a future council would have to make that decision ultimately.
No, I'm just asking. So is it a renewable 2-year experience, or it's gonna just fall off the map if we haven't created that zoning district?
Right. I mean, that's up to the council in the future. If they create the district, I would think they would not renew it. But you know, I don't know who's going to be in the council in 2 years from now.
Okay.
So is it the goal that by doing this within the next 2 years, that as we're sitting here, that we're going to create this district?
Well, that was the suggestion of all of us as a whole, as a consensus anyway. So I think this is an accountability measure for us to actually move on the things that we said, and we got staff recommendation that was the best protocol and approach for having a designation.
Okay. Councilwoman Hood?
So in the next 2 years, the council comes up with a identification of where the entertainment district should be in Clarkston. And let's say that a business that is selling alcohol, etc., turns out not to be within that district? What then?
Having a designated overlay district is to advise them that that is the designation for which, if you have a business establishment that fits those parameters as an entertainment or serving business, that you have to be in that district. There is no what if. The what if is that person needs to be in that district. If not, that person needs to relocate, and there needs to be a process, because that is the only designated district that those type of businesses can be in.
And if they can't relocate, they go out of business, or at least they can't sell alcohol.
They can't sell alcohol past the hours.
Yes.
Okay. What about, all right, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So based on what we're hearing, do we need to update the conditions as far as the resolution?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's agreed upon.
Okay, so is this agreed upon by a majority of the council?
Oh, I don't know.
You're gonna get to comment. You got time. I won't forget you.
No,
Okay, so
agreed upon, how do you mean, to draft the ordinance?
yes.
Yes.
We want to get Stephen.
Right, because we have to have
Time to draft.
something, even
Yeah,
if
'cause
we
we
have
don't have
people who object, we still need to
Yeah.
have something
To
to read. Okay, so
vote on
let's,
it. Yep.
okay, all right, so Stephen, you heard the information. If we need to do follow-up, you can make sure to reach out to Councilwoman Bell and Councilman Carroll for the additionals.
Okay, we'll do.
Okay, all right.
This is for the next month, or is this for one
guess-
week from today?
1 week. From
One
today.
from 1 week from today.
Okay.
Okay, and just as another piece to it, I'm correct if this, from a document perspective, that there is a window of a month to apply. Is that correct?
Yeah, they
Okay.
have only 1 month to apply.
To apply, okay,
For the permit.
all right. Just want to make sure we put that
I
piece
have
in
a
there.
question.
Yes.
Do we have a number of offenses before you lose your right to operate under these hours, or are you just saying, is there a number, or first, second, third offense?
For due process reasons, can we specify, or we can just say it can be revoked? I mean, I know alcohol licenses can always be revoked, but.
So you can use, I mean, you could either, we already have in the alcohol code that if you violate our code of ordinances, then the city council can hold a hearing and vote to revoke your license. So you could do it that way, or you could let the municipal court process be the due process and say that if you get convicted of X, Y, or Z, crimes that we're worried about in connection with this, then it automatically revokes your late night aspect.
Well, that doesn't work because the business doesn't get the offense. The person in the parking lot or in the business gets it.
Yeah,
So
I
that would-
think that's a definite problem.
Yeah.
Why should, on the one hand, why should they be punished? On the other hand, it's the environment created by the late night alcohol that's the problem.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that's just kind of a policy question. The due process is mandatory.
Right.
And it can be done here. It can be done in municipal court to a higher standard. And either one of those would be legal, but it wouldn't, if it was a relying on the municipal court conviction, then that would have to be a conviction of the business, which does happen. If they violate codes, the person in the parking lot wouldn't be in that category. I mean, it already says in the alcohol code that if you're doing something at your business that's injurious to the public well-being, that you're, if this is not you doing, I misspoke. If your business is creating a problem for the community, then it can have its license revoked.
Right.
So then, do we need to put stipulations on it, or?
I mean, my personal recommendation would be to leave it as in this new ordinance, saying that late night permittees are going to be held to a strict standard of not being too noisy, not disturbing the neighbors, not having crime, and that this permit can be revoked by the city council, and just do it here. And so that way you would hear all the evidence.
Recording in progress.
Okay. So yeah, you're fine with that, or you're fine with designating at least a number before it comes to the council?
I asked the city attorney's recommendation, so I defer to his recommendation.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying the other way is wrong. I just thought that would, I don't think we want to set up a rule where it's like an automatic. Right. You know, I mean, it seems like you would want to use your discretion,
Right.
but maybe not.
Okay. All right. So if everyone wants to use discretion on this, Councilman Perkins?
Mr. Good, so one concern I have too with this is, say there's a parking MOU with, location, say it's another business, something like that. How does that play out in terms of enforcement?
You mean if the noise is happening on a different property in connection with the licensed business?
Yeah, would we just find that property, or, say if I got a buddy with a law firm next door who has an ample parking, and I've got a late night establishment, and I tell my buddy, hey, listen, can my clients park in your parking lot since you're not going to be open?
Right. Well, I think that obviously throws a wrinkle in. I think that would make it very hard to use the municipal court citation, under that hypothetical. But I also think that if we use the city council power to revoke, and then we had testimony here that said whatever the problematic thing was in the next door parking lot was directly related to the late night alcohol business, and here's how, then you could revoke their license, or at least the late night part of it. And what I was thinking is that they would be handled separately.
Right.
To whereas you might want to be loath to just kick someone's license out entirely if they were warned going in that this is going to be monitored carefully, that revoking the late night hours would be a separate decision and an easier one.
I have one follow-up question.
Yes.
So this is for council members Bell and Carroll. Do y'all have any thoughts on how you would set up just the process? So if we're talking about a council-led decision on this where complaints are handed, there's sort of a council level hearing, how does that go from a complainant to actually initiating that process? And also, how do we avoid something where somebody just gets irritated at someone else? Maybe they have lost a bet, and so a bunch of people come and are accusing them for it. I'm just kind of trying to look at this from different angles.
Councilmember Perkins, are you asking me about an administrative process?
Well, yes, in a sense, yes, but also, we've got the old ordinance. We don't have any of the sort of draft or any sort of draft of the new recommendations. So
Okay,
this is my
go
thought
ahead.
process. I think as we draft this, and I would like for, and I'm just making the statement, for the planning and zoning, as well as, I know we got the assistant police chief back there, and the city attorney to work together to figure out what does that protocol look like. Because to Councilmember Perkins' point, we're talking about what are the steps and processes for us to have enough complaints to figure out what has validity to it to lead to that revocation process. And I think that takes an intersectional approach as far as the departments and how we should handle that. And we should be giving guidance that is also drafted in that ordinance to a certain degree, which may delay the process, if I'm being honest with you. But I think if we want to make sure it's seamless and there's clarity around it, I need to know it from all perspectives. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And just to the to the administrative thing, I think it's sort of there's a little bit of a handshake that happens there in communication too. And so if we're saying, hey, there's 3 complaints, how are we defining a complaint? Is that just I wake up one morning, feel irritated, and shoot off an email? Do we have some kind of burden of evidence? Do we want to go into that level of detail? So that's just sort of where I'm.
I think we defer to the administrative departments that we have that see those complaints to identify the validity of them, because I wouldn't know if, you know, if there was some truth behind it or if it was just because I'm irritated from it, right?
Right.
I do think that, to your point though, which is not really a direct point, but I do think that we need to figure out who responds to those adequate complaints, and then how they also ensure that it's not like retaliatory complaints to a certain degree as it relates to some of these businesses, right? And which is why we got to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for that 2-year baseline to ensure we have that entertainment district that's set in a way that it doesn't abut some of the other challenges that we can potentially have that you're alluding to.
Okay. Does that?
Yep. And my main concern with that, just since this is still citywide versus a specific area, we have to take that in consideration. So,
Right.
in my opinion. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
And thank you.
And we'll move on to the people. So I see Debbie already. Come on, Debbie.
Ready. And here's what I'll say. I can't say this louder. I'm Debbie Gaffman. I live at 928 Mill Avenue, 100 yards from one of the lounges that wants to be open till 4 o'clock in the morning. Yesterday, we had a meeting across the street from me for a zoning ordinance, and at that meeting, I did a very quick review of every person there except for Beverly. Everybody else. There wasn't a single neighbor that was thrilled to have that there at all, let alone open till 4 a.m. How is this good for the city of Clarkston? How is this good for our citizenry to have the liquor place that will sell till 4 a.m. when Stone Mountain doesn't do it, Tucker doesn't do it, Decatur has 2, and one of them's Thinking Man's Cafe where they're drinking coffee till 4 a.m. And he told me we usually close at midnight. So, and I talked to the other place who has closed since then because they didn't have enough late night business. So I don't see a reason to have an area in Clarkston for drinking till 4 a.m. I don't think that's good for our city. I don't think that's good for our citizens. I don't care how desperate nurses are, which was their argument. Nurses need a place to drink after work. I think they can drink in Decatur at Thinking Man's Cafe. But I don't think they should be drinking here. I don't think it's good for our citizens. I don't think it's good for our citizens. And what you said about the memorandum of understanding, when they park at Texaco, it's loud and screaming and bottles thrown all over the place. When they park at the tire place on the other side of the wall, they gun their motors, incessantly until like 3 in the morning. It's like a little joke of theirs. I went up and talked to him about it, and here's what the guy told me when I went in and said, that gunning of the motors is driving me insane. I'm going to call the cops. He said, it's not on our property. We don't have any control over that. It's at 2 in the morning. They certainly have control over it. We are not doing something that's good for our citizens. This is Clarkston. We're a little bitty town. We're trying to get better. This isn't making us better. This is making us drunker, and it's making our police force work harder, and it's making the people in the neighborhood crazy. So you can move it wherever you move it, next to Strokers or anywhere. People are going to hate this. And if Stone Mountain actually told us on the phone, thank God y'all are doing that, because we're certainly not. That's honest. I don't think we have the capacity to manage this. I don't think any city manager in America wants to get up at 4 o'clock and go check and see if they actually closed. Because we know now they're not closing at 2 very often. Very often they're there till 3. Who's checking on them? Where's the check? That was the problem in Decatur. I gotta go. That was the problem in Decatur, was nobody wanted to stay up that late to check on these places. We don't have the capacity. We don't have it.
Thank you, Debbie.
I can't say it again. It's not good for us.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up? All right, former Councilman Dean Moore.
Dean Moore, Rayford Trail. I agree with Councilman Hood, that it's been tried before. We've spent a lot of time discussing this, and it didn't work. We've got issues with it. We don't have a zone. We don't have a district. If you do it citywide, I don't know that you're going to have a lot of new bars opening up. But I still think we need to go with the restaurant and require all these places to serve food. That's one of the problems with the people that are consuming alcohol. If they don't eat, they get drunk faster. And we've seen a lot of damaged furniture around the city. We've got guardrails, we've got fences that are destroyed by people running into them. Mailboxes. And I think that if you're going to do this, I think that you should put something in the ordinance. I don't know if Stephen can craft it this way, but there should be one night a week where a council person goes and stays up there until 4 o'clock in the morning. So we can go talk to them and they can experience what's actually going on in that establishment. Because I think everybody here is probably asleep by 10 o'clock, maybe 10:30 on a council night. But I just don't see you as being patrons of this place. And everything else you do seems to be somewhat self-centered about what you think the city should be. If you're going to pass this, I want to see you out there. When I come home from work at 4 o'clock in the morning, I want to stop by and talk to you and see, what you think about the place.
The nurses, with all the nurses.
And yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of medical work and done a lot of restaurants, a couple of bars, but they didn't last very long. They were kind of overblown in their grandiose expectations, but the restaurants have all done really well. As a matter of fact, I built a coffee shop with Chris Busing, one of our residents, or maybe former resident. I'm not sure. I haven't seen him for a while, and it's still in existence down on Marietta Street. People can do business. They can change their business. But to have to keep coming back here and trying to force the city into a 4 o'clock drinking that nobody wants here, because I think everybody that comes there is from out of town. And they don't care about running into fences or getting too drunk to make it home, or they're too drunk to even come to Clarkston and they hit the guardrail coming off the exit. There's a lot of damaged furniture and there's a lot of reasons not to do this. Like I say, if you want to meet me out there once a week, I'll get up, I'll go over there and see you, or I'll stop by on the way home from work, depending on what my schedule is at the time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And to that point, Mr. Quinn, we do have something where we can, if a business is utilizing another business's parking lot, we can revoke that agreement if they're non-compliant, correct? If, for example, if they're causing a lot of noise.
The public disturbance
Right.
is associated with a late night alcohol, even though it might actually occur on a different lot, then yeah, I don't see any, that seems fine to me. I mean, you would have to be convinced by the evidence that what happened on a different lot was from the patrons of this business. But if that's the case, then that's the case, and it doesn't matter that they did the problem on the other side of an invisible property line.
Okay, and we can also, that agreement, because they have to apply for that agreement, correct? To use the other parking lot, so we can revoke that agreement for that too.
Sure. I mean, I'm hearing about that for the first time, but I know that every business has required parking, and they can enter into agreements to use neighboring ones, especially when they have different hours. I'll have to think about that a little more. I mean, if we revoke the alcohol permit for late night, I'm just not sure about.
Well, I was thinking before we got to that point of having to revoke the alcohol license, that if part of the nuisance was the usage of the other parking lot, if we did not allow them to even use that other parking lot.
I see what you're saying. We could do that, yeah.
Okay.
We'd have to have the same kind of due process.
Right. Okay. I was just asking.
Okay, that's a good idea.
That's
I will follow up with Mr. Carroll and Miss Bell about the exact rules they have in mind? Because I was making notes, but we didn't go into all the details.
Okay. Okay, is that good for everyone? All right, this will not be on consent. We'll move on to item 6A, which is to discuss a resolution to issue a Series 2024 general obligation sales tax loss bond for $7 million with Webster Bank and interim Mr. Defnall. And let's say I want to call him short timer.
My last official work session.
Last official work session. So how many years before we start this have you been here?
9 3/4.
Let's give him a hand. So right, a lot of unofficial.
Yes.
Right, but and before you start your report, and I know this is going to be your last one. I know we're going to talk about it in council meeting, but I just want to say thank you. Enjoy your retirement because we've enjoyed your service. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that,
Yes, this is to adopt a resolution to issue a Series 2024 general obligation sales tax loss bond in the amount of $7 million. Davenport and Company is here. They're our financial advisors. They did an RFP, and he's Doug Gebhardt with Davenport is going to go through that RFP process and the recommendation.
okay, outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Dan. It's been a pleasure working with you over the last several years, and congratulations from Davenport as well. Again, my name is Doug Gebhardt with Davenport, the city's financial advisor. You may recall that we were at the last work session where we kind of brought you up to speed on the plan of finance and the path forward. And so here tonight we are to present the results. So we went out and sent an RFP to local, national, and regional lending institutions. We ended up getting 7 proposals back. They're from First Citizens Bank, First Internet Bank, Flagstar Bank, Southstar Bank, Regions Bank, Truist Bank, and Webster Bank. And the interest rates ranged from 3.41 to 4.75%. 7 proposals is a tremendous response. When we did this back in 2020, although it was in COVID times, we only got 2 proposals. So the fact that in this tightened lending environment that we got 7 bids back is a testament to the city's current financial position, and so we're extremely pleased with that. You can see there on the first page, we highlighted blue in Webster Bank. That's our recommended proposal. They provided the lowest interest rate. The next page contains a brief summary of the recommended. They're going to be a par amount of $7 million. The term is roughly 4 years. The interest rate of 3.41, and that's a fixed interest rate all the way to final maturity. You may recall that in our planning rate that we presented in the council meeting was a 4.5%, which wasn't that absurd based upon some of the other responses that you see here. So we're over 1.1%, about 1.1% better than what we had planned, which is phenomenal results. It does allow for slight prepayment flexibility, meaning we can call the bonds or refinance starting on October of 2026, basically a 2-year non-call period. The bank had no legal fees associated with it, and we're scheduled to close by October the 10th. So the next page shows the final debt service schedule. The annual payments are roughly $2 million over the first 3 years, and then drops down to $1.45 million. You may recall we wanted to front load the authorized bonding amount so that if there was future needs that were accelerated as the city's projects come on that were approved by SPLOST 2, we could borrow the balance of the authorization. So we front loaded it as much as we can while still remaining prudent on the projected collections. So ultimately today we're going to recommend approval of the bid from Webster Bank. It was the lowest interest rate, and it did allow prepayment. Some of the other ones that had competitive had non-callable provisions in there. They agreed to our principal structures. There's no legal cost, and it is a fixed interest rate, which is great to hear. So with that being said, the next steps and the timetable is that we've negotiated with the bidders. We've gotten the bond documents in a great shape, and our legal bond counsel, Terry Finister, is available by Zoom in the event there's questions on the bond resolution. But with her and the combination of Stephen, we've negotiated with the bank and their counsel and believe that we have the document in near final form. So we ask that you review the responses today and seek approval of that bond resolution at your meeting on the October 1st, at which point we can formally award the bond to Webster Bank, and then in turn close just about a week later on October the 10th, at which point money on the bank and you can start spending on those projects. So I think, thanks to staff and Dan particularly for their help in putting together this RFP. We are extremely pleased with the results. The lower interest rate resulted in about $160,000 of interest rate savings from our projected planning rate. So that's tremendous. And additionally, the cost of issuance budget came in lower than what was originally anticipated as well. So with that, we believe that this is a great proposal. The bond resolution is included in your packet along with this presentation. Happy to answer any questions, but ultimately that bond resolution that you'll be asked to approve at the official meeting sets forth all the terms and conditions associated with the bank and kind of the repayment process, the security behind the loan, amongst other things. So with that, I'll stop and answer any questions at the pleasure of the council. Thanks again for having me this evening.
Okay, and thank you for all your hard work to save us some money in the process. So we really appreciate that. Council, do you have any questions? Okay. Hearing none, do we have anyone signed up for this one? Okay. Okay. So with this, can we have, do we have all the wording so we can do this as a consent agenda item?
I really think that this is significant enough that it should have a separate vote.
Okay, all right, no problem. So we'll have 7 million is a little bit too much, yeah. So we'll have this on the agenda, but thank you again for all your work. Okay, so this is an agenda item and we'll review. And next, I'm so excited for this one. 6B, to discuss an alcohol license application for DBA Tacos and BBQ LLC. DBA Tacos and Barbecue for restaurant retail on-premise consumption located at 4540 East Ponce de Leon Avenue. And with that, we will have the alcohol license, and that will be Ms. Mitchell?
Yes. Matthew Coggin, owner of DBA Tacos and Barbecue LLC, DBA Tacos and Barbecue, located at 4540 East Ponce de Leon Avenue, Clarkston 30021, has made application for an alcohol license for beer, wine, malt beverages, and distilled spirits by the drink at the restaurant DBA Tacos and Barbecue. The Alcohol Review Committee received and reviewed the new alcohol license application and verified the business license has been issued. All on-site inspections and measurements have been performed. Background checks were conducted and passed, and zoning compliance have been performed. The ARC determines this application is in compliance and fulfilled all the requirements and recommends approval of the alcohol license.
Okay, and we have the applicant here, Mr. Matt.
My name is Matt Coggin with DBA Tacos and Barbecue. Basically, I've been in business for about 25 years. No issues with previous licenses. So I don't see any need not to just move forward.
Okay, all right,
And we're not going to be open until 4.
thank you. With that, do we have any comments from the council? All right, no comments, just consent. I'm ready for my veggies.
All right, let's do that ribbon cutting parade now.
Okay, all right. Okay, this would be consent. Do we have anything from the public?
I'm familiar with this business. I had a post office box. They were on the back side of the post office for 25 years, and I had the post office box for 30, so I was there longer than they were. But there was never any problem with this business, and it was good food.
Okay, thank you.
So I was really thrilled when I heard that they were coming here.
Okay.
So appreciate that.
All right, and there's no issue with us doing this as a consent? Okay, consent it is. All right, with that, so for anyone who's just tuning in, we originally voted to defer to the next council work sessions, items C, D, and E, which brings us to F. And that is to discuss a resolution to repeal the city's non-detainer policy and to require the Clarkston Police Department to cooperate with federal authorities pursuant to OCGA 35-1-17. Mr. Quinn.
Madam Mayor, this is essentially an action that's dictated to us by the state of Georgia. And, I think we talked about this a decent in-depth in the work session. Do you want me to revisit it? Or?
You may just kind of give an overview so people understand, because you talked
Sure.
about this during our council meeting and legislation that was approved.
That's right.
Right.
So, in the past, for a long time, ICE which is the Immigrations and Custom Enforcement within the Homeland Security of the federal government, issues what's called a detainer request, which is basically if you as a local government, primarily if you're operating a jail, have an individual that ICE believes is not legally authorized to be present, they request that you detain that person rather than releasing them into society, that you hold them until ICE comes and picks them up and pursues immigration enforcement against them. Under the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the federal government cannot dictate to state or local governments that they enforce federal laws. So it was essentially optional to comply with an ICE detainer request or not. Now, in the most recent legislative session, the state of Georgia has adopted a new law forcing local governments to comply with these detainer requests. And although the federal government cannot dictate to us in that way, the state government can. And they have specifically said that if we don't, they will take away all our funding for everything they give us. And so here we are with because we previously adopted a policy directing the police department not to comply with detainer requests, we now need to repeal that so that our current policies will be consistent and compliant with state law. And just to add one more thing, as I mentioned, the detainer requests are almost always directed to jails, and we don't have one.
And that's part of the audit thing that we also have to do by
Yeah.
October 1st. So in addition to us having to remove this, repeal it, we now have to do quarterly reports as part of the state audit process. And the first one is due October 1st. So just added more paperwork.
Yes.
So yes. Okay. Any comments or questions on this? Councilwoman Bell.
Now, where Mr. Dan at over there? So Mr. Dan may or may not have this answer as well as the police. But can somebody tell me how much money we actually get from the state that goes to law enforcement?
Ask your question again.
How much money does the state give us as funding for law enforcement? Was my question.
I don't think we get any
By
money.
the next meeting, I would love. We don't get anything. That's what you said, Mr. Dan. That's exactly the answer I wanted to make clear.
But that's not the limit of the funding they're threatening to take away.
Yeah.
How much they ever gave us?
But that's the
I don't know
federal
the answer to that.
but based on what I'm understanding, it's the federal funding that we would not also
Right.
be able to
It's
receive. So
administered by
that
the
$1 million that we got for that grant, we would not be able to receive those funds if we're
Right.
non-compliant with
all
that.
kinds of GDOT.
Right.
We definitely get a significant amount of funding either from the state or from the federal government through the state.
Right. So we would not receive any of that funding. Okay. Councilman Carroll, I'm sorry.
So I think our original non-detainer policy was right. I think it is unconstitutional to detain someone for longer than their crime that they're charged with. I think the state law is wrong, but we no longer have a jail cell, so I don't see a reason to threaten all the city funding that we're going to get from the state over a stance that, in principle may be right, in practice doesn't really change the practice of our police department. So
Right.
I would support this resolution changing it, even though I think the state law is wrong and our original policy was right.
Right. And so, thank you. And also, in addition to this piece, where this is the detainer piece, we just have to be mindful. There's nothing in terms of welcoming language as far as resolution 2 that we need to be careful about, that we approved as a resolution.
Right. Well, I know we're a member of the welcoming cities, but the state law that I'm aware of was against sanctuary.
So
city.
if you looked at that document that I sent out,
Mhm.
I know I sent it to you and to the interim city manager. It had in the back, and it also has in the resolution what defines a welcoming city, and I mean a sanctuary city. And so the verbiage in terms of any type of policy, that references that whole welcoming piece, that's something that we also have to be mindful of. Just double check that piece,
Okay.
because they've been, this is unfortunately, we have to process this as a community. We will continue to do what we need to do. I expect, our police department will continue to protect and serve those who live in Clarkston and come through Clarkston. But, in terms of compliance, we will comply. That's it.
I'll double check on that, Mayor.
Yes.
So I just want to clarify, when you say welcoming city, you're referring to being a part of I believe it's Welcoming America.
Yeah, I don't think we're welcoming. We're not a welcoming city as part of them. We've always said that we are a welcoming city, but we didn't do the certification to be a part of, to be that.
Yeah, because that's a formal organization. And I want to clarify too, I was at the Senate committee hearing where they discussed this, and they made a lot of changes. I think we got the document as we walked in. So it's there with a number of nonprofit leaders and advocates. And I want to clarify, our non-detainer agreement is, if I remember correctly, specifically for non-judicial detainers. So because there's a lot of confusing language that gets thrown around with immigration. We use the term refugee, just to describe anyone who's fleeing conflict. We don't talk through the specific immigration pathways that are very legal and are set up to allow people fleeing from conflict and persecution to come to our country. And so just because it's become so politicized, it is a political thing, right? I want to make sure that we're clear. We were not, complying with non-judicial detainers, which have a history of having errors. There's a lot of potential problems with those. And so if someone committed a crime, there was actually a judicial warrant out for them. We weren't saying, hey, listen, you beat somebody up, you stole somebody's car, you committed murder. We weren't saying we weren't going to comply with that. It was for things where it was, you might not verify maybe somebody's paperwork. Maybe it could have been a clerical error that someone was asked to, pick somebody up and put them in jail for that. And so there are a lot of problematic things. I won't go into detail with this bill. I believe one component, I can't remember if it was, came out in the final version of it, required, the collection of DNA for misdemeanors, so, your tail light's out, you get a ticket, you get pulled over, say you're, taking your kids to school and you just look like a certain person that might or might not be American. That's there's a lot of protections that it provides without accountability, for those, for an officer to detain somebody and put them in jail and collect their DNA for it. And so, talk to your state reps. This obviously we want to make sure that our public is protected. To your point, Madam Mayor, but I think there are better ways of going about it. And so, completely agree with what my colleagues have said here. We do have to to comply. It's not as risky for us, but it's risky just outside our borders. We're only 1.7 square miles, and our community has to travel outside of our borders into areas where they are going to run into this. So that's my statement. Thank you.
That's okay. And so that should do it. Councilwoman Hood.
Yes, just to add to that, there's a concept called home rule, and the legislature lets cities make their own regulations, etc. Home rule just gets eaten away and eaten away and eaten away. If there's anything of importance, our legislature decides they're going to make the decisions rather than decisions being made at the local level where the people in that city get to decide what kind of city they want.
So thank you. We've seen a couple of those that popped up that Mr. Clem mentioned. So is there any discussion from the public on this one? Former Councilman Moore.
Yeah, Dean Moore, I'd heard at one of the meetings, I think at the work session where it was discussed when this first came up, and I heard that we were going to be required to establish records for people that were in possession of an ounce or less of marijuana. Is that still the case? Or is that just something that kind of flew up in the air and was not a part of this?
It's not a part of what is addressed by the resolution that's on the agenda.
Right.
It is part of a state law that was passed this year.
Right.
So there's a law that we need to create a record, even though they gave us the ability to.
So we'll when we have the opportunity, just kind of as a follow-up, we'll do that. But I have the actual information because I want us to stay to the agenda because the agenda is discussing the non-detainer piece.
Okay, well, the point I was getting at is that we're creating, by doing that, criminals in our border that potentially would be deported if they were in violation of a minor law that's like a traffic violation. Driving kids to school, happen to be driving down the road smoking a joint. I don't think those are grounds for deportation.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Any other comments at this time? Hearing none, is this a consent agenda item? Consent. Okay, all right. So with that, we also, just for those joining us, we deferred G, H, and I, which then brings us to 7, and that is to adjourn. I'll take a motion.
Do we adjourn?
I'll take a second.
A second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting. All in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned.